It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
This is what we're talking. We fought the machine. After a century of war, we remember that which matters most. We are not afraid, but we are relatively concerned. Charlie Kirk being assassinated yesterday had an impact I don't think the world really understands, and there's reasons. And I'd like to examine those. Now, what we're going to do today, Frank and I are going to share our thoughts and experiences on this, and we got some breaking news and some things for you to see what's going on. And I wanted to make sure that we have a full understanding of what's going on, what we know, what we don't know, what we can expect, and what we want. And it now is there's so much going on that I don't know that we're going to get a replacement for Charlie Kirk. But what I think has to happen is this, and I want to express myself. The reason Charlie Kirk was such a thing was you go through his history. One, he didn't graduate, college. He learned by reading. He's only 31. When he was killed. He has a beautiful wife, beautiful 2 children. He turned his efforts into a $100 million project that was having an example to a lot of people, important people, Generation Next people. The left wanted to have a open discussion. We need to have and be part. We go, fine. I'll go where it all started, where the battle is, the college campuses. You want to discuss? Let's discuss. So he did. He engaged in conversation. There's the mic. Bring it. Bring the professors on. Bring the trans, purple hair, progressive, whatever, commies. Do it. Because he read everything. Read a lot of philosophy, history, understood the Constitution, how our system of government is supposed to work, what makes it work as an informed populace. This is one thing. You go to the Jefferson Memorial, and one of the inscriptions they have around there is about education. Jefferson wasn't talking about public education or funded education. It's just education. We need to be an educated populace and understand so that we can have a valid opinion. And that comes from free speech. To be able to discuss these things, to be able to emphasize that which makes America great. And we want to make it again, what does that mean? Charlie Kirk was effective. He is from, I get the impression, I'm pretty sure he's from Arizona. He has a Turning Point USA here. I remember a couple of years ago, I went and Tim Pool and Luke Radowski were there, and we hung out and got to know each other.
Yeah, Ernie, I just want to say his whole family's here. His mother, his whole family's here from Arizona.
There is last night we have a special guest that'll be joining us here in a bit. Chip Saunders, he goes by. That's how we'll refer to him. And I've known Chip since, I may mess up and say his name, but and he's not really that clandestine anymore. He, had issues with the Department of Justice, and he's working. He finally got his rights restored, here in Arizona. Went through that process, and now doing the Fed. So we'll kind of, let him complete that process. But what happened was Dream City is a church, one of the churches that refused to shut down during COVID. And it was, that's what we were looking for. That's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see, who are the people that just aren't buying the crap. And a lot of religious leaders and churches, they folded like a wet napkin. And there were many, I wouldn't say many, but several that go, no. The church, we meet, we support each other, we have our own way of doing things, we'll take the risk, we're good. You want to put a mask on and go over in the corner over there and knock yourself out, but it's not a requirement, leave us alone. Dream City is a church in, I think they have one in Scottsdale, and they got one in Northwest Phoenix. And that particular church is where my oldest daughter, Rhea, and her family and her husband, Tim, go. So Donna and I, whenever we'd visit, we'd wind up going to church with them. Love the church. And their focus is Generation Next. They have their own schools. They have their own curriculum. And their campuses are geared around the raising of the children. This was children, Generation Next, children. They did have, a year ago or so, they had some problem with a teacher, and they were, trying to groom somebody or something, and boom, they just came out open about it, did a whole investigation, were open about it, they take this stuff seriously. Charlie Kirk was doing that for a little bit older Generation Next as they're going into college. This thing like Elon goes on this woke mind virus kind of thing. He was in direct attack to that. What happened is he's in his early 20s or something during the 16 campaign for Donald Trump. And it became quickly obvious that he was a man of substance, clear vision, and an activist. He was willing to take it on, and he felt that through his reading and research and so on, that he had something to share that was needed to be shared, that he had to combat the forces of evil. This is what made him such a target. This is I don't want to get emotional here, but this is my initial reaction on this whole thing. The reason Charlie Kirk was targeted by they, them, those, the left, there's a lot of things we can go on, conspiratorial, whatever, and who, cui bono, who benefits from this. And I don't know, AI popped out a thing for they, them, those of this is what you got to do and what, stop. I have no idea. My problem is are we ever going to know? I do not feel confident, even in the Trump administration, that there is going to be a reconciling, frog marching of the bad guys going after the real threat and release the freaking files on everything. Full disclosure. The truth will set them free.com. Now, we haven't done the page, but when I had Stuart Rhodes on, which, by the way, did a segment taken over from Alex Jones on InfoWars, in the final hour or so, Stuart Rhodes is up there. Now, at Ron Paul's 90th birthday party, I got time to sit for hours and talk with Stuart and a small group, and Luke was there, and, a bunch of guys. And we had a lot of them on the show over the last couple of weeks. Now, Stuart Rhodes has been on the show several times. I don't know, half a dozen times, a lot of times over the years. And even then, after his experiences being in solitary confinement and everything over a year, kind of crap that they did with the January 6th thing, which he didn't even go into the building, and they go, anyway. the J6 guys got pardoned. Now, he got his sentence commutated, I think. He did get pardoned, but we'll see if that comes. What Stewart's thing was, no matter how hard I pushed, is that he wanted to make it clear that the process by which we get this country back to the people being governed, can they govern themselves? Well, I think so. But that's the danger to they, them, those. They don't want us, dictating to politicians what they were electing them for, or even have the ability to elect them. So America is broken at a fundamental level. We have our competitors in philosophy, be it China or other more totalitarian, authoritarian, socialist, communist groups. They're blazing up to our level of technology. They're coming after our money, the middle class, with the help of people inside. Our system is only made for a moral, good people. It was made the way it was with bad guys in mind. How are we to be able to govern ourselves in such a way that it's for the rights of the individual? The Declaration of Independence thing. Purpose of government, defense of individual rights. Doesn't do that. It's time to alter or abolish. It's your right. It's your duty. Charlie Kirk took on that duty. This is my problem. The reason he was such a target, the reason he was so singled out, the reason I believe he was killed, the reason is because he took on all of the responsibility that we, certainly as men and as American men in America, have been lax in. I think it was by design. I think all of this has been on purpose. I think we are the target. Why? Because middle class, that's where the money is, dummy. That's where the influence is. That's where the opposition to they, them, those that won't leave us alone, regardless, you out one group and there's another one waiting behind them, because we're up against evil. This is a spiritual battle. This is what is in support of humanity, living life, to keep on keeping on, to fashion raw materials in service of our lives, our shelter, our clothing, our energy. When you allow a collective to be in charge, they are going to fashion every effort, every program, every dollar, every institution, everything to serve their ends, which are what? I have no idea and don't care. It's not me. It's not mine. It's not us. So when you say make America, what's America? Well, let's just assume it's a geographic home base of freedom, and we're going to make it great. What was great? It was freedom. It was options. It was ability to take control of your own life, and that governments are instituted among men to do that. The further we get away from that, the more these kinds of problems that we have. Charlie Kirk took that conversation straight in the maw of the beast, where they were the strongest, where they were influencing Generation Next, where they had the ability to put a captive audience in front of a authority figure, professor that's going to tell you what's up. And then your kids come home for their first holiday, and all of a sudden you're the enemy. I feel that we are responsible for his death. That is what bothers me. Because we have done what we always have done, or certainly in my lifetime, as individual human beings, as men, heads of households, and women, whatever, but it's a responsibility of men. We are conditioned as the male of the species to be the protector. We Now, women could do it too. I'm not, protect all they want. But as a responsibility of men being men, a good example was Charlie Kirk. Because he was so much taking on the responsibility of what every man should be doing, it made him a target. My hope is that men will start to see the battle that we really are in and that we take responsibility. People think, well, who's going to replace Charlie Kirk? Everybody. Everybody. The battle's on. Here we go. My concern has been that we always need an inspiration. Somebody needs to start it first. Somebody needs to be tip of the spear. Somebody needs to show that resistance is not futile. That, it's not the destination only, it's the journey. The journey to freedom. The journey to humanity's best, brightest future is when we are in charge of ourselves, our own destiny, our happenstance, the pursuit of our happiness. Happiness is not an emotion like joy or something like that. It's more what they said, the pursuit of happiness. It was more like you're in charge of your own circumstances, your happenstance, your ability to be free, to pursue your goals. And what should they be? Well, the professors, the academic industry is there to tell you it's not what the country was founded on. Charlie Kirk went directly to the heart of the beast. In all authoritarian societies, it's the Hitler youth, it's the Stalin youth, it's the youth of reprogramming of, in Cambodia, the killing fields or whatever. It's to erase the old individualist mindset and replace it with what serves the elite. Elite. I hate that word. Elite. The few. The very few with resources that keep piling on more and more resources for them to be able to rule us. Technocracy is real. It's coming. It's here. AI is going to be in the service of not us. I'm just saying. But does it have to be that way? Charlie Kirk represented, no, it does not. We need to have an understanding, clear understanding of what this direction provides, where we are going if we don't stop it. Well, this manifested into political power. An entire generation, woke is dead. Is it? It was just a tool. They'll call it something else. I remember when Howie Long was governor of Louisiana back in 100 years ago. And he goes to Congress, and I remember him saying, it was during the time that Mussolini's trains in Italy are running on time. Yeah, if you just had somebody in charge, if Trump took over Amtrak and gosh darn it, we're going to get trains on time kind of thing. And they go, do you think fascism is going to come to America? Absolutely. It's going to be in the name of anti-fascism carrying a cross. Always remember that. So there has to be a fundamental base understanding of what we have: individual liberty, self-responsibility. In fact, in the 90s, when we were running campaigns and so on, I was county chair, we were running this, and this is where Chip was involved in that a lot. Every one of our signs, hundreds of them, that we would make, big 4x8, and we had a workshop, and that's how I know sign, everywhere a sign. It was individual liberty, self-responsibility. You want what the Libertarian candidate is? And they had, Statue of Liberty logo on it, and then the name, and we put in the name on these blanks and the office they were running for. But that was the theme of the entire effort in Arizona. Wall Street Journal comes out, Arizona, the libertarian state. And I keep saying this, it's always Arizona. There's a reason. It's because this is where the pioneering spirit, The no fear, no fear, no fear has been cultivated over decades, and Donna and I and Chip and Frank, we've all been on the front lines on this. That's why we get Napolitano. She was assistant U.S. attorney to Reno in the Clinton administration. She went after the militias. She went after Christians. Christians have been the target. Waco, those damn people believe in the resurrection of Christ, therefore they must die. I mean, they actually said this kind of stuff. Napolitano became Attorney General. Then she became governor. Then she left to go be head of the Department of Homeland Security. And then from that, she was in charge of California universities. This progression was intentional, inevitable, and definitely demonstrates what's really going on behind the scenes. They get shiny badges, positions of power, who gets prosecuted, who doesn't, and the use of the media. We have lived this. We have seen this. This is why we understood what was coming with the Ron Paul Revolution that started in 2007 from here in Arizona. They got to get that Arizona thing under control, man. What the hell? Is it in the water? You know, are they drinking well water or something? Are they getting fluoridated enough, or is there something going on? And it was from this attitude that you, all you listening, you have a responsibility to be more Charlie Kirk, because you're not going to get a quality replacement. These people are so rare that are just circumstances, humanity, time and pressure. God creates these types of people and opportunities for us to take back that which is ours, our humanity, to keep on keeping on in a direction that serves the individual. Can you have that? A lot of the bad guys, they don't believe so. Bernays, Edward Bernays, which was the nephew to Freud, came up with the concept of PR, public relations, propaganda, controlling the masses. This is why I was big on the 4-part series on the BBC called Century of the Self. There was another one they did, they called The Power of Nightmares. And those two documentaries, they're like 4 hours each and broken up in hour segments, was even emphasized when they were going after Kanye West's support of Trump. He goes, look, black men, watch Century of the Self and you'll get it. We are being controlled. Now, whatever you think of Kanye, you know, is one thing. But the fact that he even mentioned that, ooh, they didn't like that none too much. They're like, holy crap, they're inside the moat. They're in the castle. We got to expunge them from the seats of power. Any department, Doge was a very important thing of rooting out a lot of the problems. USAID took away a lot of their money, but they have billions. And this is worldwide. You have Klaus Schwab get targeted for, no, he spent, money wrong or some BS. And then there's settlements. This is how the rich transfer money, and it's not taxable. Oh, well, I'm going to pay this to that, and kind of, well, they just got another batch of money, and Larry Fink comes and now in charge of the World Economic Forum. You can see it happen. What is the counter? The counter is an informed populace, general public opinion. RFK Jr., being in charge of the National Institute of Health, comes out and goes, we're going to know. We're going to know. It's these vaccines. This is an environmental thing. We have the data. We got computers. We got AI. We got, testimony. We know what's going on. You need to take this out of our food so that the American people can discern right and wrong, can think critically, can be educate themselves. COVID comes in, and all of a sudden, people started, getting slapped awake, just like, 9/11 did. Today is September 11th, 2025. The anniversary of 9/11 terrorist attack, inside job, they, them, whatever you want to call it, where the World Trade Center was attacked? Do we know what's going on? A lot of people we know. Today, Tucker Carlson drops I think it's a 4-part series on 9/11. Now, of course, we do a regular show with James Corbett. He's documented. I'm sure a lot of his work went into it. We have a lot of people, architects and engineers, for the truth. We've had them on. We've discussed, got hundreds of hours of us discussing. Thousands. This is the theme that I'm going to be stressing today. Charlie Kirk did way more than his share, which is what made him the target. And it was due to our not doing our share. And this is what I keep saying the problem is. The problem is that we think that we can delegate our personal authority over our lives to somebody else. A politician, a lab coat. 4 out of 5 doctors say you can't. You have to take responsibility for your own life. You have to create your own environment. You have to occupy the land. Occupy your own skull at least. Occupy the classroom. Occupy the minds of Generation Next. Because if you don't, somebody else will. Well, Charlie tried to demonstrate that this was going on. How? Who was doing it? What philosophy we were up against? And the power of general public opinion. He had to be taken out or stopped or curtailed. Or is there some AI, saying, this is what needs to be done, and they, them, those just do what they're told by a computer, which would be coming? A lot of people speculated that, certainly from the left, they shot their own to try and give attention to it. I don't care. I really don't. All this has done is demonstrated to me that we, as individuals, must hold those of anti-life philosophy accountable. That is what is not happening. When talking to Stuart Rhodes, while we were doing the show a couple of weeks ago, and we had talked, at Ron Paul's thing, the truth will set them free. .com, by the way. The truth will set them free. Who's them? The kids, Generation Next. I had graphic artists do some artwork up. We're going to start. What would you put on the landing page? Released Epstein files. Why? Do I care about, whatever might? No. That people had to be held accountable. What was going on there? Don't know, but we need to find out. Released the JFK files, Martin Luther King files, RFK files, UFO files, disclosure of everything. We're paying for it, but for some reason, we have been convinced that, you don't know what you don't need to know, and it's a need-to-know basis, and guess what? We need to know, and we know that you shouldn't know. The truth will set the next generation free. It's the only thing that will. Charlie Kirk represented that. When I saw, this is how it happened. I was working out in the lab. I was in the shipping container. We're building shelf. I was just working, doing stuff. And my phone kept, blinking. Buzzing. And I turn all notifications off. I don't, except for family. I hear when I'll check it later. I got stuff to do. But when my family starts, on our SMS family group, bzz, 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 whoa, man, what the hell? I go on, my oldest daughter, Rhea, that goes to Dream City Church, where Charlie Kirk's from. She was saying Charlie Kirk just got shot. And she had the early file that showed him getting shot. And he said something, yeah, well, gang bomb, and boom. And he got hit in the neck. There's things, people, all kinds of stuff. We'll talk to Chip about, he's in on the gun thing. But when you saw him get hit in the neck like that, he's done. If he survived that, that'd been another, Trump miracle. But he didn't. What did that spark? I'll tell you one thing. Do we expect to get a real, thorough, going after any and everybody that has to, no matter where it leads, from the FBI under Kash Patel? Will that happen? Patel and Dan Bongino went over there and the promise, we're going to release the Epstein file. We're going to find out what's up. Who runs America? How is this being? We need to know. We need to know. Our government is there for us. They're to serve us. It's for us to be fully informed and make these kinds of decisions for our future. Can we expect that? We haven't seen it yet. So there needs to be a campaign of tell us the truth. What is uncovering the secrets and exposing the lies? That has been the focus of Freedom's Phoenix from the beginning. And what will that do? It'll reignite the flames of freedom. From the ashes of Lady Liberty's torch, Freedom's Phoenix. Freedom's rebirth. Is Charlie Kirk that trigger? I've been feeling this for a while, and certainly here recently. Talking to family and friends, I'm saying, man, I feel it. It's coming. There's going to be the Rosa Parks thing. Won't go in the back of the bus. Stand up and kind of something happens. Some death, some attack, some something. Well, man, if this doesn't qualify, I mean, damn. So the theme that I'm hoping that we'll get over the days, weeks, months, years, decades, is that this is a mile marker in human history of when there was a time before and there was a time after an event, an awareness, an awakening. The fact that Charlie Kirk was a faithful person, a Christian, that understood the difference between right and wrong, good and evil. You can say bad, I go freedom, good, government, bad, bad, bad. Then it's freedom, good, government, bad, 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 bad. How many bads I got? It gets to the point, freedom, good, government, evil. When I'm saying bad, 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 I mean, what am I saying? You get to the point of evil. What are you battling? How far are you willing to go? What are you willing to set aside in your life, your distractions, your time on the internet, your time playing video games, your time avoiding raising your children, your time of delegating to someone else, your time of going out to dinner and spending time and how many boats I got and all that. At what point do you understand that all of that pales in significance to your responsibility as a human being and for the men out there as the protector of your family? This is why the collectivists always attack the family. No. No, this patriarchy, matriarchy, whatever archy, that's not, the they, them, those archy, the oligarchy, the whatever oligarchy they got. They have to attack the family. That is where humanity flourishes. That is where it starts. That. We've noticed this. When Napolitano came in as governor, we had there was a privately funded gun training option that you could support rifle teams here in Arizona. That was extracurricular, and people funded it, that their own schools, high schools, had their rifle teams and so on. Oh, they didn't like that. They didn't like concealed carry, unrestricted concealed carry. You buy a gun here in Arizona, you can carry it open, concealed, whatever. You don't know what's out there. That's why you don't have a lot of mass shootings in Arizona. So you look at that, and Napolitano signed that. And we're going, whoa, what up with that? It was under the condition that they had preschool funded down to 3 years old because grandma and grandpa were having too much influence on the raising of Generation Next. We have to get it in under government funded control to raise them correctly. You think all this just started. In the late 70s, early 80s, affirmative action, learning Ebonics in English 101 at ASU, Arizona State University. I'm sitting in class and we're going to learn how to talk like the hood. What? Where did this come from? You know, the gay movement, a lot of people didn't care. You're gay, well, I don't care. But it had to, just last night, I went by our old workshop because we were down at Brophy Prep. It was a high school game. My grandson was playing football. It was right by where our old office used to be. There was a gay card shop. It was big, probably 2,000 square foot, purple neon lighting. Well, we made friends with them. We're libertarians. We don't care. But they were not libertarian supporters. As much as we were, peace out, we don't care, do your thing. They were very much against our campaigning and our philosophy because it didn't allow for special rights. That's what they were going for. That was the vehicle that they were using for this in Arizona. We saw the beginnings of all, hell, it probably goes back even more down, but that's when we certainly became aware of it in the early 90s and the 80s, as a young man out of high school in 79 and do it. This, as you look back, you see the progression. This was on purpose. This is planned, it is orchestrated, and it's an attack on what it is to be American. There's one thing we can't stop, and that's being American. I am of the opinion that this, as always, turns into a spiritual battle. It is a battle between that which is good and that which is bad. Now you got to define what's good and what's bad. So then they take over education, down to 3 years old here in Arizona, funded by they, them, those. That was even, we'll liberalize guns. But we get the minds of the children at 3. And we understood that early. And Chip was one of the researchers on all. Now you can just go online. You see all the pre-filed bills. You don't really see what's going on. But you can see, kind of a theme of what's going on. Well, Chip and I and a lot of us activists, we had a box for SAFE, Second Amendment is for everyone, down at the state legislature, the House of Representatives. They had boxes for media that they would put in all the pre-filed bills. Beginning of the legislative session, we go and pull all those out, and a dozen of us or so would sit there going over each one. Okay, this is a gun thing. Here you go, Chip, and here's a thing, and here's a thing. We go through every one of them, and you could see of the 1,000, 2,000, thousands of bills that were dropped, you could see where it was going. Who's paying for this? Who's a special interest? Who are the industry? Who is the lobby? Who is they? And then you find out USAID and that taxpayers are funding the dismantling of what it is to be American. The promise, which was what? The Declaration of Independence. That's why this show is Declare Your Independence. So the one main thing that I wanted to get out in this is that, and when we were at the Brophy Prep is a all-boys Jesuit school, and they have Xavier, which is the girls, and they're always top in football. And when my kids went to Phoenix Christian junior senior high, they're the rivals and football and whatever. So we're familiar with the area. We used to have a workshop right across the street from them. And this is I was concerned. You're at a religious event. And I got to share this. I'll be done in about 5-10 minutes here, and then I'll pull it over to Frank. When we were at a football game for my youngest football playing grandson, like 10 years old, and they're in the East Valley, which is, new, more prosperous, all the tech moving to Arizona expanded out there. You go the southwestern part of Phoenix is older Phoenix, and a lot of Hispanic community is there, and so on. You get a lot of the gang influence, that kind of thing. After the game, the other team surrounded, even though we lost, it was a tight game. It was like tied, it was a really good game. For some reason, a bunch of the guys surrounded the coach on our side, and then all of a sudden everybody's running to the parking lot. I'm like, what the hell happened? We go there, and you're my job, and all of a sudden, a couple guys are taking off their shirts, showing all their tattoos, and they're going to get into a gang thing. Here we go. Some guy brought a gun. He had a gun, kind of showed that he kept it in his pocket. He goes, we're done. Everybody go home. But he was a young guy, and these guys are, oh, yeah, your mama and your mama escalated. Well, of course, my son, one of the coaches, and he goes out and he stands right in the middle of everything, keeping everybody apart and kind of being, and I'm going, God, this is, you the man. He's one of those men. He just, no fear, and we're just going to, let the kid, everybody go your car. He's just there keeping it down. Well, of course, I'm standing, I got my son in the middle of this thing, and I'm standing there just, being the old guy with the hat, the old man is standing there. I'm probably the oldest guy standing there. I'm, kind of, just observing what's up and see where this is escalating. It got to the point that I go get my .40 caliber out of my truck. I put it in my pocket. I don't brandish it. I don't let anybody know, but I'm like, it comes down to it. I'm protecting my son, my family. Eventually, it's over. People start walking, and then the police come. Somebody called 911. You got 4 or 5 police cars. They're coming in, it kind of breaks up. So when we go to the football game last night, I'm thinking, I got a little .380, a little Ruger, tiny little gun that's Donna, she keeps. And I just put it in my pocket. Nobody knows, nobody cares. Hell, I'm probably one of a gazillion people there with a gun anyway. And you have to take responsibility, and you can in Arizona. Now this school limit thing, whatever, I don't think it applies to private school, whatever. Don't care. So we go, and you have to take on a responsibility as a human, as a protector, as a man. I don't carry as often as I used to because I'm out in the middle of nothing in the desert. But it's getting to the point where this Charlie Kirk thing have our generation, a little bit younger, down to Charlie Kirk generation, starting to see if they can, if they have it, whether the laws are in your favor or not, take responsibility for protecting your family, yourself, your community, your state, your philosophy, your country, as we have been overrun. Now, I'm about open immigration. I'm like, you want to sponsor someone, I need, I give you a job. I'm much more open in immigration than probably, most right now. But I'm not for an invasion. I'm not for not coming, through the checkpoint. I'm not for, are you diseased? Are you a criminal? I'm for, you want to work hard, which my experience with the Hispanic community and the restaurant community has been that. Hardest workers, great. I have nothing but respect and paid them more. It was a meritocracy at my restaurants. So I have a probably unique perspective in this. I'm not against immigration, but I am definitely against an invasion that was targeted, like what's going on in Europe, that you are just watering down the philosophies of civilization, of Western Judeo-Christian kind of ethics of 10 Commandments, thou shalt not be a dick. Who's going to enforce that? Pam Bondi? Trump? The FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the alphabet soup of whatever? We've got alphabet soup in government and alphabet soup in philosophy with the LB, whatever the hell people got. Where is this going? The only way, in my personal opinion, have been on this planet, over 60 years, been where the rubber meets the road, a political activist running against these people that are ruling us, in the green room having conversations with them, interviewing, legislators and leaders and Supreme Court justices, come on the show. I am been directly involved in the process. And what I keep advocating is you take responsibility for your life and your freedom. And if the only option is to remove yourself and get out and do it my way in the middle of dead man, occupy the land. That has been my peaceful solution. Will they, them, those leave me alone? For decades. For my children to inherit this, to build on this. Because the city be a-coming. I can see it coming. So this is a wake-up call for all of us, even me. What do we have to do as human beings? And I'm going to say it, as men. What makes you a man? Well, recently we've been pushing the preparation. Doug Casey and Matt Smith wrote this book. They have their, Matt's son, 20-year-old son's been years into this thing. It's a 16-part, 3-month phases. You do 16 3-month sections. That's 4 years. That's 4 years of education. He's already become a sailor, sailing around the Straits of Magellan. You go in, did EMT, he got certified for that, then went to be an EMT in a wildfire. He's going to Thailand right now to learn Muay Thai, to be able to do self-defense. He's gunned up. He's got, a lot of these modules, been a cowboy, a gaucho in Uruguay. He's doing, Doug Casey said, we need to be men. It's the preparation for young men. And this comes from a narco-capitalist, anarchist kind of guy. I asked Maxim, the son, to send the book, and this was just last weekend. We had done some artwork for him. You'll see it, on our email dispatches promoting the book. That I had him send a copy to my 15-year-old grandson. And I'm going to do my best to try and, you're not going to get it all at school, even though they go to a good school. But I'm like, no. You got to man up. We are not manning up Generation Next. Because of that, Charlie Kirk was influential and demonstrated the power of Generation Next, and that's what they, them, those were so afraid of. Within a few years, he was able to shift the direction of millions of young people towards the goal of being a man, being a woman, being a family that understands the difference between good and evil, and go make babies. If you can, get all the crap out of the food supply to where what has been the target. They've been telling us infertility. We don't have to kill you. We just have to make sure you don't breed. That's how important I see what was being done, and the importance of us taking on our responsibility as human freaking beings and directing our lives and this country. Are you going to have a country? Do you believe in countries? Are you a nationalist? Are you? Freedom's got to have a home some freaking where. And we were given the opportunity by people that were in the same situation, up against an attitude of elite, of royalty, of we rule you. Can people govern themselves? Of course they can. They do. In the headwind of all this crap. So that's where my direction has always been. We're going to try and amp it up a little bit here, just so I like to sleep. I tell you, it's all about sleep for me. If I go to bed worried, if I go to bed I didn't do my best that day, if I got a bunch of boxes need to be checked on my to-do list, I can't sleep. So I do everything I can every day to progress. Now it needs to be, and I known this was coming, and I've been building up to this anyway, is that we got to take care of our own health. Now, Donna and I eat pretty good, but it starts today. I'm going to do a 7-day fast. I've done this before, and I feel a lot better, and it's not like a big giant thing. But, I'm going to do a 7-day fast. Go ahead and kind of clear out my body, be a lot more careful of what's coming in, and clear my mind. No recreationals, I need to clear my, I know that this event is going to have the same impact on a lot of people. We got to man up. Just saying. Frank, go.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning, Ernie. Chip, welcome. I'm glad Chip's here with us. I'll probably postpone some of the thoughts about the firearm and all of that since we have a bona fide expert on the show. So when I get done, I'm sure we'll be hearing from Chip. So I look forward to that. And welcome to the audience for another, Charlie Kirk report, or at least the status of the American people report, really, for today. The fourth turning. So, it's interesting, during the Revolutionary War, after the British lost and they laid down their arms, literally, after the siege, and the colonists were singing a song. I'm sure it was the British that were singing a song called "The World Upside Down," and it's an old English tune or something, and they were just singing it as they were being marched out. And from their perspective, everything was topsy-turvy. And I always remembered that part, the end of that skirmish. And when you think about it, they were at the end of the fourth turning. And that's exactly what we feel like today. I'm sure a lot of more normies, a lot of our friends and relatives are starting to understand, if they haven't already, that conspiracy theory, uncles or friends, and who's mainly most of you are considered conspiracy theorists, are starting to sound much more common sense every day. So anyway, we will get to, I'm going to make some points about Charlie Kirk, some of the effects it's had on myself or my family already, and kind of what happened yesterday. And then also some conclusions, or at least some thoughts of what this means, not just about Charlie Kirk, but like what Ernie's talking about. I'm sure we all know this is not really just about Charlie Kirk. This is, it seems to be, and I said this on my own, and I am clearly not the only one out there. I think it's so self-evident, but it is a true turning point in this nation. And I cannot believe it's such a coincidence or apropos term that I think is going to have more meaning as we go forward, the country. But before I get into all of that, I just want to bring up a few things at the beginning of the show, because there's, this is the main story. However, just consider, and I'm not, just think of all the stories that are being deep-sixed right now because of this. Now, I want to be really clear. I'm in no way, saying that this is all planned to put the kibosh on other stories. As often, I wouldn't, put it past the deep state to do. But just a couple of things before we move on back to this topic. Next Wednesday, we'll speak the day after on Thursday, is the decision from the Fed whether or not to lower interest rates. And this is one of the biggest. It's always an important declaration for the business world, especially here in America, since we're the reserve currency. But I think it's going to have many more coattails of what this decision is going to be on Wednesday. There are businesses with bated breath, wondering the direction of this administration, but also even more importantly, is the direction of the Fed. Is the Fed truly independent? And God knows in this audience, and the Fed, I get all that. But for something that's supposed to be independent, will it remain so? And, remember, I've always been the greatest supporter of Donald Trump, but I'm going to say it in a technical sense. Donald Trump is not a cultural fascist, but he's definitely proving himself to be an economic, or let's say an economic fascist, as far as the concept of government taking over businesses. And what other way can you take over the business than taking over the economy? Which he's throwing a lot of shots over the bow, such as firing that one of the Federal Reserve chiefs a few weeks ago, which was on basically pun intended, trumped up charges in my opinion. So that's basically arm wrestling control of the Fed to him. And if the interest rates go down against what Powell wanted to do, then we're basically seeing a possible takeover of the economy, from the executive branch. So there's a lot riding on that, and I think it's important to watch that. We also have, not to make light of any of this, we had the third annual at this point UFO hearings, which were just held 2 days ago. And each one, more whistleblowers are coming out, and more representatives are being dragged into this who thought that serving on this UFO panel was a joke. It was sort of like if you get the bottom of the barrel because they want to put you on the defense committee, you got the UFO deal. And they're realizing that the deep state issues of everything, all these different scandals from RFK, JFK, and we can keep going. These representatives are starting to see how this corruption and these conspiracies are, that there's something to it through a backdoor entry point, which seems to be the UFO deal, because it's non-political. It's not, meaning it's like if you take Epstein or many of these scandals, there's always they make a political bent out of it. But the UFO deal it's kind of extra political in a sense. And so these representatives on both sides, the only time I see them get along about anything is on this UFO committee. So I encourage you, for any of you following this topic, and I've talked about it on the show in the past, check it out. It's about 2.5 hours, 3 hours to watch. Great interviews and testimonies. George Knapp, for the first time, got to testify, much on record, including finally putting in the congressional record all of the reports from Russia during, what was the name of it? Poyaskatska? What was the name of that? Back in the 90s or after the wall fell, when many of the American journalists were able to go to Russia, and there was an opening of ties. And George Knapp, who followed the UFO topic here in America, wound up going to Russia and started saying, hey, we have a secret program here. At least I'm hearing about it. Do you guys have one? And he found the similar analogs in Russia, and he got all this information that we've heard about for a long time. But anyway, it's been translated into English. It's been floating around, but it finally now made it to the eyes of these representatives. And each of these 3 hearings, representatives have been acknowledging, I really didn't believe this coming in, but after following this the last couple of years, I'm now a believer, blah, blah, blah. So it's interesting to see that. And also, for nothing else, for the highlight of the year, there's always a couple videos they show. You should check it out. There was a video of a FLIR video from one of the jets showing a Tic Tac going over the ocean. It looks similar to the other one. It begins rotating, and then a Hellfire missile shot from a drone. You see the missile come from around 11 o'clock and hits the UFO, and you see debris spiral off. And then the debris circles around and congeals back to the UFO, and then the UFO just takes off. I mean, it's right the whole video. I mean, it's incredible. So anyway, for what it's worth, that occurred, and this is going to be overshadowed. Also, we're on the brink of World War III, at least further. Then the World War III clock goes down another tick from the drones that were shot down. I think it was 18 or something over in Poland. So Putin sent drones on their way to Ukraine, and for whatever reason, some tactical reason, I assume, I'm sure they didn't get misguided, they went over Poland airspace, and so the Polish people shot it down. So technically, that is an act of aggression. Now, Poland is trying to pull back and say, look, we're not trying to piss off Putin over this. We're just saying, hey, just stay off our airspace and we'll call it a day, right? They're trying to de-escalate it down, but still, this is the first attack upon Poland direct since World War II. So it's something to watch and see what happens with this.
I think they found out that was a Ukrainian drone. It wasn't Russia anyway.
Oh, is that right? That's just what I heard just from this morning as an update. So maybe it has been changed. So we'll look that up. Furthermore, the 9/11. I'm glad Ernie brought that up. It's in the 9/11 anniversary. I'm sure many of us are kind of aware of with this whole Charlie Kirk of overshadowing it. And Tucker Carlson did this amazing video series, which I have yet to see, I did see the previews of some of the highlights in an interesting interview that he had with Piers Morgan. Now, again, I don't get my news necessarily from Piers Morgan, but he's another great canary in the coal mine that Ernie doesn't pay me enough to listen to to these types of shows. But for me, I find it very important to understand how the mainstream or lamestream thinks of problems. You have to know, hate to say your enemy, but you need to know how the other people are thinking in the game. And so Piers Morgan is a great canary in the coal mine. Just think about this for a moment, everyone. Tucker Carlson admitted that he bought all the propaganda when he was a great right winger and went with the military-industrial complex back in the day. He went back in the day when he was on CNN, Crossfire, when he used to wear the little bow tie and all of that. And he was all, George Bush can't do anything wrong, and they're against our freedoms. And he admits that there was something, he was drinking the Kool-Aid. So he would have called out Ernie Hancock and any truther as a nut job, and probably almost could be locked up because of so how anti-American they would be. So here it is, 20 plus years later, and now he's making a documentary, essentially acting as a truther, saying, "Look, I'm just asking questions, but there's something here to see." And he's done more than a yeoman's job putting that together. So I hope that the documentary he made does not get completely overshadowed with what's happening now, and it probably will. There's a lot of work behind that, and it was primed for more mainstream red pilling. Furthermore, speaking of red pilling of mainstream, is Piers Morgan himself, who is more moderate left wing in much of these issues, but he had, of course, Tucker on his show talking about this. So just having someone, Tucker or otherwise, discussing what is essentially a truther type of claim, that's something he never would have had on his show. Again, another step removed. And Piers, if you watch the show, he kind of admits this later on in the interview. He says, I probably never would have even brought this up and would think this is all conspiracy theory, which I hate to use that term. But he said, I'm starting to believe, essentially what he said was, I can't not put it by the government to do something like this. It's something I never could conceive that the government could lie to us at such a level. The official 9/11 Commission said so, and of course the government wouldn't lie. That'd be wrong. And yet to him, he said what woke him up was the government's play on COVID. And since COVID, that is now why he basically doesn't take anything for granted from what they say. And now he's got conspiracy theory Tucker Carlson all of a sudden, who used to drink the Kool-Aid on his show. So I just want to point how the Overton window on this topic, on just government mistrust overall, is profoundly shifting. And there's a lot behind that documentary and who's now advocating watching it. All right, next is, I'm going to say just once, I'm going to say this quick. I promise I won't do a frank rant on this. But this, especially with the Charlie Kirk death, this is another, massive burying of the whole Epstein story. This audience knows how I've gone ballistic on the Epstein deal, and every week it's just one more excuse to bury this and get rid of it. Again, I'm not in any way believing this whole thing was orchestrated to hide from that Epstein story. They've done a good job trying to move on from that on their own. But there was the women came out just a couple weeks ago, and they are now creating their own list that they might release on their own because they have lost trust in the whole system. So there's still coming. This story's not over by far, but it's just one more overshadowing from what happened yesterday. So then let's move on to Charlie Kirk. So we could just call it superficial, but I think there's some meaning behind it. Donald Trump today announced that he will reassign the Medal of Freedom to Charlie Kirk. And for those of you that may not know this, that Medal of Freedom was already assigned. He was going to have the ceremony to Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani, after being sick and getting hit, it was a car crash or something he was in. But after that, I'm not sure if that sparked it or not, but Trump decided to give it to Giuliani, and then he switched it. I'm assuming Giuliani understands, given circumstances, but I've never heard of a president switching it at the last minute. But, makes sense, especially from Trump's point of view, and I think it's apropos. So as far as with Charlie Kirk, he's here in Turning Point, and you created that, and he's based here in Arizona. Myself being an activist in Arizona and going to many of these functions, he's just a name and a face I've probably run into more than most, just being in the area. Whenever President Trump would come to Arizona, at least almost every time that I'm aware of, there's only one place that he goes to, and that is Dream City Church that Ernie was talking about. Dream City Church is literally walking distance from my home. I live on a mountain, on the Shadow Mountain, and you climb the mountain, and literally on the other side of the mountain is the church sitting there. In fact, I kind of assume there's probably a bunch of Secret Service people on top of that mountain that I do hiking trails on, because it's literally right over the church. But it says a lot that that's where Donald Trump would go, and I think most of that is agreements probably through Charlie Kirk and Turning Point of their association with that church. It's one of those mega churches, but they have a great reputation. We don't attend there as a family for services. However, we do go there often for functions, and we know people who go, including many of my patients. I have to point out that not only is it a safe spot for Trump. Remember, when Trump would come during the summer, it's 120 degrees, and you have like senior citizens, all the snowbirds here. Well, not quite snowbirds in the summer, but they're standing out in 100+ degrees to see Donald Trump. I mean, I never saw anything like that. The loyalty of the elderly and walkers standing in the sun. So it says a lot when they're at that church, and that church opened their doors, and it was a nice, cool, safe place with very limited windows, which also I find interesting at that church. So safe place. For those of you in the area, I just want to promote the church a bit. They have a Christmas concert they have every year. It is the largest. It's like a Broadway level show they put on. And at the very end, they have this, every time they redo the nativity, and they have, hundreds of people come in from all angles of the aisles coming down between you, representing each faction of the three wise men. And then at the end of this train of hundreds of people, all in costume from back in the day, they have 3 camels. Each one has the wise men riding a real camel walking down. And I always joke that's how I get my good daughter to go. I want to see the camels every year. But it's a beautiful service and presentation. Going back to this, I heard about Charlie Kirk getting shot while it was middle of seeing patients. My better half had told me just that something happened, and I was surprised how much it affected me. I respect Charlie Kirk. I called him out a few weeks ago when he was taking a knee to Donald Trump when Trump tried to he personally called many of his supporters and influencers to drop and move on from the Epstein topic. Right. And I went on a rant on that, and I called out Charlie Kirk as well, and many others did too. Kirk, to his credit, went back on the show and said, all right, I hear you guys. And a point I'm going to kind of mirror later on in my little soliloquy was how much, and this surprised me, how much that the youth took this Epstein situation much more seriously than the older people did. Than the seniors on Fox News don't seem to be as upset about it. They're more willing to just move on. And that's a whole other conversation about why that is. That truly has shocked me and surprised me about why. But nevertheless, I think that says a lot about maybe the young generation just giving up on all of this. They don't believe anything coming out. Either that or older conservatives are so used to scandals that they just go, just one more. maybe they're just so jaded it doesn't matter, or they just believe the system still. I don't know, and I don't want to get into that right now. But the fact that Kirk, I've had a few bones to pick with him, but nevertheless, I've always respected him greatly for putting together Turning Point. And that also is every year there was I forget the name of the meeting, Ernie. It's the one where you got to hang out with Tim Pool, and every year Turning Point puts on essentially their equivalent or counter programming to the RNC. So the RNC would have their giant mega conference where they get to promote Ted Cruz or Lindsey Graham or whoever that they want, but they don't really represent this growing patriot movement that Ron Paul was a big part of starting, and many of us, and yet Charlie Kirk was able to tap into that sort of that blend between traditional conservatism, but kind of the youth libertarian movement, and kind of made this unique blend. And so I forget the name of it. If you want to look it up real quick or any for me, but I forget it. But it's here in Arizona. He hosts it here just because he lives here, and the top leaders of the conservative movement and influencers all descend here in Phoenix at the convention center, and it's massive. I tell you what, you think you're at a rock show. I could not believe the lights and the colors and the lasers. I mean, it's a production that Kiss would put on. I've never seen something like that for politics. And when I started to understand how it was very youth-based, sort of makes sense. You need more colors and make it fancy and fun. Great for influencers for their videos. But it really is. It was a great event, and they would never be pressured by the machine of the RNC. They did it their own way, and that's how powerful Turning Point is. And Charlie Kirk was.
And demonstrating the threat.
Exactly. You start to see the threat that he posed from many directions. So I was at work, and it started to affect me more than I thought. And that's kind of, I don't want to make this about me, but I'm just thinking I'm probably a mirror to perhaps many of you out there. I received a text from Ernie's wife, Donna. I could tell she was very distressed, and I just put the phone away, and it was very challenging. When you're in doctor mode, you have to be healing and a healing energy. I know when there was a trauma in my life, it was the hardest to go to work. These patients are sick, and I was probably more mentally sick, if you get my drift, than my patients having their problems. And sometimes a doctor should not be playing doctor, and it's something I've learned and I've had to tell my students about. But when you're already at work, it's kind of hard to turn it off. And so I turned it off. I didn't want to know. I figured, that he's still alive. I just need to get through the day. And then the very next patient, because most of my patients, let's just say, are not blue-haired lefties, most of them. But he came in, and the first thing he did, he asked me if I heard the news, and he told me that he passed away. And it just threw off my day as a doctor. So, but it would surprise me that it did so. And I wanted to consider why. So, can you turn that off, Ernie? That's in the background. So anyway, Ernie?
I'm trying. I'm trying to.
It's all right. Ernie's got too many buttons. It's like mission control there. So anyway, and then I'm getting messages from my wife, and I don't always like to just chat about my family, but my wife is another canary in the coal mine. And Ernie has learned with my better half, who's usually not overly opinionated, very quiet compared to me, sort of like Donna, but she's a strong woman like Donna as well. And, Ernie got to get a taste of that on election night here at our house. She has a few opinions, and she was all alone yesterday. It was her day off taking care of our child, and she had a very hard time. I'm not going to go further into it, but, being a new mother herself, finding out that Charlie has two young children. One's like 1.5 or something, is the oldest, and the other one was just a few months old. I mean, it's just the words for the sadness of that is just a family person talking about a man. It's interesting you pose that question. What is a man? You're right. We should be asking that. It's always, what's a woman? Well, we should ask a certain Supreme Court justice if she even knows what a man is. And that's what I think Charlie Kirk's, what he represented, especially to the youth, to show them what a man is. A man does not have to be the stereotype that the left wants to use as the Marlboro man, smoking smokes and telling their wife to sit in the kitchen and bake brownies and all sorts of other unfair stereotypes they like to pose. Charlie Kirk was kind of a man of today, but still strong, and stood to his family values. And just think of the contrast of what the far left was trying to advertise, in essence. And Charlie Kirk was the opposite. And it's the type of opposite that we don't often see because it's so obvious to many of us of the older world. A man, and he has a wife, and he got married when he was in his 20s, I believe. Yeah, he did. He gets married in his 20s. He didn't wait until he was in his 40s if he got married at all. He had 2 kids right away, back to back, which traditional families have done. He has a family that loves him already. He He's religious, goes to church, and just speaks from a common sense perspective, and very articulate, and knew his numbers. And that's the antithesis of what the left is trying to sell, or at least try to normalize. That you can be, that you can be still living in your mother's basement, playing video games, smoking weed, thinking that all of a sudden I might be gay and I want to go a snip job and there's nothing wrong with me, and normalizing many other. It's kind of like our own realities. Now, Charlie Kirk was always respectful to people who had different points of view with it, but he was acting as a torch, as a lighthouse for men who have been so confused by the media, the system, by commercials on television that make every family man, seem like a dumbass. They all have to be like Homer Simpson. You can't have a strong man. I mean, God, we put on our family for family time, which we'll watch something each night or play a game, and we watch the Brady Bunch. We watch Leave It to Beaver, and which my wife never got to see those shows growing up, and she's astounded. She never knew those shows existed, and she loves them. She's never seen portrayals of families in that way. So I recommend any of you guys, go back to those old shows. They really are fantastic, and they hit you hard about how much our society has changed. Anyway, but watching my wife go through her emotions yesterday, and with myself, but especially seeing her, I was surprised. Maybe I should not have been a surprise. And I'm realizing that we're not alone, that's what the country was hit with, many of you. I want to point out also that Turning Point was, I don't know if say it was co-created with, but many people forget that one of his colleagues that helped be a mutual troublemaker when he started Turning Point was Candace Owens. And Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk, those two were out there at many of these functions. And Candace, of course, now she has 4 children, and she has her own podcast, and she's a whippersnapper too, sort of like a blend between Charlie Kirk and Megyn Kelly. And she is appealing to the female demographic, the young female demographic and the middle-aged female demographic. So she has an extremely powerful voice. I would say, I don't know, say second to Charlie, but certainly up in his ilk. So just watch Candace, and I've been fearful for her life, honestly. The type of people she's been taking on, especially her criticisms of Israel and other issues. Also with Charlie Kirk, I have been surprised, honestly, about how he has been doing these shows. These presentations at colleges. I've been dreading something like this, but I'm sure Ernie would agree. I'm sure Chip as well, that I hate to say it was only a matter of time, but it made me wonder, I don't know, like, why not have them more inside? I know some of them were. I think I give him full credit, and I hate to even say, how come you're not going inside? Why? Because, that's out of fear, and you're caving into their threats and the culture of threat, which they've been brewing. So I have mixed feelings about it. It just seems that we're in this fourth turning, and you're riling up in the belly of the beast. And when I say belly of the beast, it's, of course, we're talking these universities that are festering this. But think also, for just a moment, I'm going to give just one little bone to throw to the leftists in that in many ways they are more dangerous than many people realize, especially the older generation. I hear the seniors complain and bitch because, my Social Security is not what I thought and all this. Well, the younger communities, the younger people, we're not even going to get Social Security. I mean, the baby boomers got to live off of all of the spoils of war from World War II, and were given, not to get a whole economic diatribe here, but they were basically bequeathed the greatest lender nation in the world. And now, after their entire lifetimes, from Woodstock all the way to, they were born into this, the great 1950s, maybe not for everybody, great 1950s, but at least the stereotype. And economically, we were doing great. But from the 1950s, they were born, And now they're after having all this money and being the world leader, which I know, not that I want America to be the world leader, but you get my point. We start off such a high, and they inherit it, and now as they're all dying off, they give us this broken piece of junk that they have worn down into the ground, and they're still complaining they don't get enough health care and this and that, and things are right. So there's a generational hatred brewing with the younger generation. And so imagine you're sitting here, you have no money. Your parents, who are probably in their 30s or 40s, they have no money. You know, they can't buy a home. They can't even afford a car for their own independence. They have, you know, they're not having families, you know, which gives you a sense of purpose. And you're not having families, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, obviously. The cultural, of them demonizing families and telling women to be feminists, and who the hell needs a man? You can just buy one if you need it. You have the economy where they can't afford it. There's obviously, it's a whole load of topic why. But that's the danger, is that the most dangerous people are the people who have nothing and nothing to lose. And that's the generation now that we're up against. And it's not their fault. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not their fault. They're products of all this, including the products of the colleges with university professors that were of communists or other types of thick people indoctrinating our children. And how did they get there? And in many ways, it's because of conservatives or middle America turning their head the other way, or not being engaged, or not being activists, or not caring, or just saying, well, as long as I got mine, and I'm going to get my timeshare, and I want to flip that house, and I'm going to go to Disneyland, and whatever else, you know, and as, you know, liberty movements or other, I'll give credit to any activist, anybody who's at least trying to make a change. You know, that was something of an oddity 20, 30 years ago. You know, it's interesting how you hear from our friends and family the last, 10 years who say, God, everything's political now. Everything's political. You know, you talk to Ernie Hancock and his family or my family. It's like, when has it not been? You know, maybe, to be fair, sometimes we have to learn to tone that down ourselves and just enjoy life, not make everything political. But we saw this coming a long time ago. It's just more and more people waking up like, dare I say again, Piers Morgan. So anyway, they have nothing to lose, and that's the danger.
Did I lose you, Frank? Chip, are you there?
I am here. I'm sorry we lost him, but I can continue with my specialty if you want.
Yeah, there was a couple of things that I wanted to make sure got addressed. And,
I'm almost done here. Questions. I don't have an answer for all of this.
Well, you winked out there for a little bit.
Oh, I'm
make
sorry.
Sure your phone's plugged in.
No, it is. It is.
All right, go.
So what I was saying is some thoughts from the shooting yesterday. You know, some specific, some a little larger. But one is, notice, and we'll see if it changes. Notice there's no calls out to ban the Second Amendment. Every time a shooting occurs, the left always uses that as an excuse. You see, we got to ban.
All right, Frank, you're winking out again.
Yeah, I think we lost him again.
All right, we'll go ahead and have him, finish up when he comes back. Some of the things that I wanted to make sure,
guns, right? But it's interesting that Columbine, who did not have a player, if I'm right, and they're going in, specifically, shooting up classes that are from churches or religious families. And now, if this is true, and granted, Ernie forgot to say your famous line, 3 weeks at the top of the show, so I'll say it for you. 3 weeks, so probably it's going to take a lot longer, if ever, on this one, which I agree with you on that. But assuming, at least the story they're trying to float now, is that this was from a trans shooter. One of the casings or a few of the casings had what, trans rights or whatever symbolism or something on there.
They found the gun.
They found, but also the casing. Supposedly the casing casings had stuff etched on it that were anti, I don't know, they were pro-trans and anti-fascist logos or something on the casings.
Of course they did.
Now, exactly, which makes me, and I don't want to get in that, I'm saving that for Chip, but that in itself makes me question it, because who's going to take the time to sit there and put that on their casings as a calling card? I mean, unless you're the Joker, but, maybe that's what this is. To me, it seems too set up to blame the trans community. So I'm not buying it right now, but let's just put that aside for a minute, is that when we do see these shootings so far, especially just the trans shooter the other day that we heard about with the children, is that it's the left shooting at the conservatives. And yet every time that happens, and of course the Nevada shooting, I mean, that was all conservatives at a country rally in Vegas, I would assume mostly conservatives at a country concert, and they were just shooting them like fish in a barrel. And yet, what the conservatives never get credit for, and the left never brings up, is that you never hear the conservatives say, wow, we didn't realize guns are dangerous, and now that I lost some of my family people, now let's go ban the guns. I just was too stupid before to see it. Talk about character and strength in purpose and in ideology and conviction of the Second Amendment. And that point, hopefully Chip, I'm sure he already gets that, in his gut, and we all do, but it's never brought up. I never hear that brought up, and it should be brought up more. So I want to bring that up. Hopefully that's something that we can take from this shooting. Also, we're looking at the battle of ideas. Where is the holy ground for the battle of ideas? It's no better place than the battle of ideas is, at least was, a university. I mean, that was, even the left would say this from Berkeley. They would say, I may disagree vehemently with what you say, but I'll battle to the death for your right to say it. Remember that rallying cry from the 60s and 70s? And now we saw what happened yesterday. We also have, we also are going to see this as the first true competency or incompetency stress test on Donald Trump's Department of Justice.
Yep.
Now, right, because all the others, he can say, well, the FBI, they erased everything, and this is not our fault, and all that other crap. This is all on Trump's watch with his people. So this is going to be the ultimate stress test. I'm curious to see how he plays it and how effective they are, or just how really compromised the entire DOJ is. Next is who will, I'm curious, and this is too premature to bring this up really, but we have to throw it out. Who will pick up the torch? I mean, it can't be our generation. It's going to be someone of the youth, someone like a Candace Owens, because she was there at the beginning. Now, I'm not trying to say it should be her. I'm just throwing out a name. I mean, it's going to be someone.
I don't want it to be someone. It has to be us.
Well, fair enough. Point taken. But Turning Point USA for I'm sure it's around Christmas time, the week or two before. It's either Christmas or Thanksgiving is when they have that mega conference, the Turning Point Conference here in Arizona. So I doubt heavily they're going to cancel it this year. If anything, it'll be bigger than ever. And I think there's going to be. I'm definitely going to attend this year. And Ernie, if you want to join me, I think there's going to be a lot of action this year at that. My concern. I agree with you about the scandals. Will there be a denouement? Denouement is a literature term, for just the perfect conclusion or tidying up the end of a story. It's like the end of Breaking Bad, the ultimate denouement. But in this case, we just have one more open wound that will fester. And we're basically, as a culture, dying of 1,000 cuts of each of these. And I'm just going to throw some out very quickly. There's JFK, RFK, Dr. Martin Luther King. We have 9/11. Now we're allowed to add that because Piers Morgan now is agreeing with us. We have the Nevada shooters. We have the UFOs. We have the Trump assassin number 1, Trump assassin number 2. I'll just throw that in there. I'm not sure how much that's still open. We have the Epstein, which is the last boss of a video game. I've said that numerous times, but that's the ultimate test case. And now we have Charlie Kirk. And guys, I'm sure you're all screaming about the 10 others that I'm missing, but that's my point. So will there be a denouement to something like this on Trump's watch? That will be the stress test. And lastly is, you still owe me 10 more minutes, but I'm going to be nice.
Hell I do.
But lastly is, and I think, I was speaking to my wife about this a little, she was trying to make sense as much as, make sense of all this, is, I said, you have to realize is that, we are at war. And I think I'm hearing this from commentators that are kind of coming to the same, like just at least maybe not that they knew or didn't know, but I guess it comes down to saying the quiet part out loud. I think one of the reasons this has become the problem it has is good people doing nothing. I think the conservative movement and the conservatives in general have been the silent majority for much too long. I have bashed them and yelled at my fellow conservative friends, not libertarians like Ernie and many of you, but my, run-of-the-mill conservative friends for decades about lying down for political correctness. That's a whole bugaboo for me, is the political correctness, and how that was really the entryway to this. And they use the most tolerant of people are Christians. And I'm a Buddhist, for those of you new to the show, so I'm not trying to just, pump up my own religion. I do always prop up. I have to give props to the Christian faith and the Christian culture that built this country, and the culture of acceptance and freedom and things that, Ernie and I will be nice today. We're not going to go on our typical fight about it, but there's so much wrapped into that. But I think Christians, what do they say about the Old Testament? The Old Testament is an eye for an eye, but the New Testament is turn the other cheek. And I think there's something about that where that makes Christians at large the most tolerant group. And yeah, we could talk about the Crusades and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I get it, right? We can get all in the history about it. But as a culture, it's something embedded in how the bedrock of American culture and individuals are. And they say, look, I don't want to be called a racist. I don't want to be called this or that. We all, Jesus says, accept everybody, turn the other cheek. And it's a virtue until it becomes your weakness. And as many of you know, I was a white member of a black fraternity, the Alphas, and the homestay mom, she used to famously say, her grandfather told her, it's great to have an open mind, but not so open that your brain falls out of it. And I would put that not just brain, but also compassion. And I kind of think that we have brought this amongst ourselves, and that's sort of the thread that Ernie was talking about in his monologue. And I think that that we're in a war, only most Americans did not realize it. And that's often the case in these sorts of things. They've been at war with us, and we just never recognized it. It's like, oh, okay, well, this guy doesn't like us, and here's we're getting censored over here, and these are individual things. But I think my feeling, I don't wish this, I'm not calling for violence, none of that, but, you can say that so many times, but how many times do you get hit in the head until you do something about it? And whatever that doing back is, that's the question. I think that's the bridge of where we go. In fact, it was interesting. Greg Gutfeld, I had 5 people send me Greg Gutfeld, of all people.
Yeah, cussing online.
Yeah, he cussed online, and he pretty much, the comedian, the funny ha-ha conservative, seriously said, in serious tone, echoed that very sense that, this death of Charlie Kirk is hitting everyone a little stronger than I think people thought. We can't just make this one more and say, well, that was a shame and move on, that there's something symbolic about this. And what's symbolic is the importance of Charlie Kirk. I myself, I'm going to admit, of course I knew about him. I followed him. I, met him or saw him from these conferences and seen his influence for years, like many of you. And I'm not that obtuse about the power and influence of Charlie Kirk, but in a way I have been, because I'm not on these college campuses. Yes, I watched those videos. What I didn't realize until yesterday was how much my wife, not secretly, but in her own time, she's watched Charlie Kirk more than I have. I had no idea. And she's learned a lot. She grew up from a far left.
Have my kids.
As a far left family. And so I think, she could listen to me and Ernie and all of us, but as they say, you're never a prophet in your own land. Charlie Kirk was a massive influence on my wife, coming from, a far left upbringing. So it shows you, the true influence that he's had and how powerful he was. And someone recently, I forget one of the shows, they were making the argument that they've been floating around, is that Charlie Kirk, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, I'll throw it to both of you, but is that Charlie Kirk very well may have, jeez, I was so nice to you the whole time there. But Charlie Kirk, you could argue, was the second most powerful conservative in the nation. And I heard that. I went, well, Donald Trump being number one and Charlie Kirk number two. I mean, I never even thought of that. I'm thinking it would be Vance. It could be it could be Vance or someone else. Tucker Carlson is where if someone asked me last week, I'd probably say, well, I don't know. And don't normally think in those terms. That's who I'd think of. Charlie Kirk, I knew was influential, but to say he was the second, and given how I felt about this the other day, and my wife, and everything that we're talking about today, I can't argue that point much. He was the future, and I can understand why people thought he was a president in making. And I certainly can see that now in retrospect, which is a failure on my part. But no, I could see the threat and why why yesterday happened. By who? We will see if 3 weeks is enough or goes longer. Anyway, thanks, audience. Those are my thoughts on all of this going on. And I'm really glad that Chip is on the show. So, Ernie, I'll turn it back to you and for Chip. Thanks.
All right, Chip. You're going to be up here in a second.
All right.
It's from a turning point USA to a tipping point. One of our participants on Declare Your Independence, Ernest Hancock Telegram, put that in. He goes, tipping point. And I'm like, whoa, man, you are correct. Trump has put out all embassies, military flags at half-mast. All right, so they're doing that. I'd say that's legit, compared to the half-mast of all the other crap. I'm like, no, Charlie deserves that. And there's videos already starting to come out of analysis because it's the internet, and we put it up on our Telegram, and Donna's putting them up on the site. Is false flag? And they have, dissecting of each of the frames, and I'm sure, Chip has probably gone through some of that. One of the things I just want to say, you talk about Social Security, Rand Paul is introducing bills to put retirement incrementally moving up to 70 years just so that it can be there so you can buy a loaf of bread with it or something. The one thing I wanted to mention, and I'll spend more time on later, there was a Christian men's group in the 90s called Promise Keepers. And it went through the same kind of thing. It was a big influence on, being head of household, being a man, but it was more geared towards families at church then. And the promise, okay, we're going to recommit to being men in the 90s. And it built up to like a 1 million man march. I think it was 600, 800,000 people showed up in Washington, D.C. And they had been doing rallies at stadiums. It's like you're filling stadiums with Christian men doing, this is what those feared, what they've been going after, and what I think Charlie Kirk kind of represented, building more foundationally from the beginning for people to make selections in their mate to be a promise keeper in the promise to be kept by the men and the women and families. When they did it in the 90s and they made it to Washington, D.C., I had friends that had gone, and a very good friend of mine was a big part of this and so on. And what happened was they go to Washington, and man, all of the NGOs and different groups, they had their 10 by 10 tent around the outside and join us and database of and surveillance of and FBI of and everything. It was like a January 6th gathering or something. And from that moment on, it kind of went away. And the reason is they went after, they tried to pull them in to the government, the administration or whatever, but they didn't have a Donald Trump that was outside of it. Charlie Kirk was inside. And he was very influential and often argued that he got Trump elected. Well, this, or certainly part of that. Well, what happened was Promise Keepers, because they were attacked so much to be infiltrated, to be part of the resistance that they felt if they didn't go along, get along, then we're done. So it kind of just went away. And the reason was for this. They saw a Promise Keepers not going away. Turning Point had turned into a tipping point. And we definitely at tipping point now. Now, one of the things that I wanted to, chip on for, I don't know how much research he's done, but they found the gun. We'll talk about that. And they want it found. They didn't want it found. They would have had it not be found. So it's found. Then we have the idea that he was wearing body armor, that they really hit him in the chest, the heart, and it bounced up, off of the body armor, something like that. And then there's all kinds, we're going to get all kinds of muddy whatever going on. That's why I wanted to have Chip on, to talk about what we know. We know about the gun. We know about the distance. We know about a lot of the non-evidence and the evidence that was there. I've seen videos just like the Butler shooting. They saw him on the roof. There's video. They go, hey, there's a guy up there. So this is so much. We need Chip. All right, Chip. We're not going to interrupt you. Tell us what you know from your perspective being a gunny, man. Go.
Well, I heard about this almost immediately after it happened yesterday, and I reviewed the footage rather immediately, and I tried to make of it what I could, and there was limited footage at first, and since then we've seen a little bit more from different angles come out. But the one I saw at that time, it was rather obvious that he'd received the neck wound, but I was also able to discern when I slowed it down that it appeared the projectile also went up through his jawline, behind his eye, seemed to come out behind his eye socket near his temple. And so that was an upward angle, and I thought, who the hell got that close that they could kneel down and do that? Because I wasn't thinking that it was a long-range weapon. It didn't sound like a long-range weapon from the audio track, but of course,
right,
the audio doesn't necessarily reveal stuff accurately. And so
on that point, I want to ask you. This is one thing I wanted to make sure got brought up. When I first saw it, the report was immediate, and I'm going, well, maybe that was the sonic crack, from the bullet, but it wasn't a delayed. You're on the ground before you even hear it, depending on how far away. And it was immediate. So I'm going, what the crap was that? And then
and that's a phenomenon called acoustic reflectivity, which I will talk about. We'll get to that. But I simply wanted to say that this appeared to be a handgun wound from up close and down low at first. And when they, seemed to capture somebody right there near the front, I thought, well, all right. The guy didn't get far, wouldn't expect him to. But then, of course, they released him, said, no, that's not him. And later on, I saw footage of somebody being interviewed, a witness who was there. And he, as it turns out, very accurately described, although I discounted it at the time, he said, oh, yeah, it was a sniper. They shot him in the chest. They were aiming for his heart. And I thought, well, that's not what I saw. But then last night, after I got back from going to the event at Dream City, the Remembrance and all, I got back to seeing if there's any new news. A lot of people had gone online and they'd broken down the footage even further, slowed it down frame by frame. And yeah, it's a gruesome task, but I felt obligated to go through that, and I did. And sure enough, it became obvious when you slowed it down and watched it very closely, he was hit in the chest, and he was wearing some sort of protective plate. And when you slow it down, you can see his shirt erupted upwards toward his chin, which is indicative of a bullet breaking up on, say, a steel plate and turning into fragments and carrying the fabric up with it. And apparently one of those large fragments is what went into his neck and traveled at that upward angle. And so this now all appears consistent. And so it just goes to show you that, even when you take proactive measures, as he did, it can still happen, and it's unfortunate. But I can also tell you, for those who have maybe not hunted or maybe not seen as much footage as I have of people being killed, I can assure you he felt nothing. It was instantaneous for him. The way I saw his body react, the projectile as it hit his nervous system, he was unconscious immediately. He never felt a thing. So we can take comfort in that.
His family felt it, though. Gosh.
So then, once I saw that last night, I thought, okay, it does in fact appear to have been a long range shot, a more powerful rifle shot. And then the footage began to come out of, hey, there's somebody up there on the roof. And, then people started flying a drone this morning to go up there and see what they can see. And from that drone view, you can look at, well, yeah, this here is how somebody could have got up on that roof. Here is a likely egress route if they did that. That bowl in which the square this occurred in was practically tailor-made for this. I guarantee you security officials are looking at this saying, how did they allow this to go forward? There was no way to properly secure that place. And I think the answer to that probably is just that Charlie was unafraid and he was undeterred and he knew what he was risking. But as you told me one time, what are they going to do? Threaten me with heaven? I'm sure that's what his attitude was. And so he was just undeterred and unafraid and went ahead anyway. But if, nobody would have ever let the president speak there because it was just it was a shooting gallery, literally. The people are very lucky the guy was only after Charlie because so many people would have died. The escape routes out of that bowl were only two. So, it could have been done better, but that's another conversation for another time.
Well, the body armor, unless you got a ceramic plate or something, a high-powered rifle, it just goes right through it. What's up with that?
No, not necessarily. Body armor has advanced quite a bit in the last 20 years. And it used to be that a 30-06 rifle, which appears to be what was used here, would probably penetrate most body armor. But mostly because of the war on terror, we developed both soft plates and hard plates, both steel and ceramic and other materials for our soldiers that they normally show through a light shirt more prominently, but they've gotten thinner and less bulkier over the years. And I'm sure he was able to afford some of the best, so it didn't show up as well. And I reviewed photos from right before the event to see if I could spot the body armor under his shirt, because I thought, okay, am I just imagining this, or was he really wearing some? Whatever he was wearing, it was very unobtrusive. And but there are many companies making that stuff, and for just a couple $100, you can have a very effective plate.
Okay, were you convinced that it was? I mean, it could even been a charge in the vest. I mean, God knows what's going on. But then you have the report and all this kind of stuff. But the the
hey, wait, 1 sec, Chip. I just want to interject real quick. If it was less obtrusive, does that mean you also are pulling back on the security of the vest? Was it compromised because it was, less seen, or no? Do you think?
No, No. Like I say, I assume, we don't know yet, details will come out later, but for the bullet to be deflected as it appeared to have been, it had to have been a plate that was rated for rifle fire like this. So I'm not going to say that the plate failed. In fact, I would say the plate did its job. It's just that, unfortunately, ballistics is not always predictable and is dangerous even when things work properly. So
understood.
Yeah, there's lots of videos on YouTube you can watch where people test these types of plates to see what will they stop, what will they not, what sort of trauma damage happens behind the plate just from the blunt force trauma of the plate being pushed into flesh, which is a big concern. And yeah, there's lots of videos where you can watch these dynamics take place. This is not unexpected. It's a little bit unusual. It's more consistent with a steel or metallic plate. And the steel and metallic plates, they're heavier and less comfortable. They're thinner and they're a little easier to hide. So that may be what he was wearing. And to prevent this phenomenon, which is called spalling, where the lead and the projectile break up and fly out laterally away from the plate surface. Oftentimes, you'll see these plates covered with something similar to rhino liner that you'd put in a truck bed, so that coating will tend to trap and slow down these fragments so that they don't do the sort of damage that we see happen to Charlie. Many of our soldiers who have been shot in these plates out in the world, fragments will fly up into their chin and the bottom of their throat, and they'll receive very dangerous wounds that you could easily bleed out, as appeared to happen here with Charlie. So that is what to me appears to have happened. I'm sure we'll learn more about it later. As far as the rifle itself, from the pictures I've seen, this is a common surplus Mauser, of which millions were made, millions were brought back from World War II. They're everywhere. This one was reworked by a gunsmith and sporterized into a more traditional hunting rifle. And almost none of them came in the caliber that we're being told this is, which is 30-06, a very powerful U.S. military round, perfectly capable of doing what we saw happen here. But I mean, you can find those everywhere, just about in every gun shop, in any block, any street in this country. Somebody on that street probably has one of these in their closet. And so depending on how long ago this was acquired, there may not even be a paper trail for it. You could have picked this up at a gun show. A guy might have stolen it out of his father's gun safe. No telling where it came from. I'm sure ATF will do their best to track it down.
Now, these Mausers, they're a long rifle, aren't they? I mean, they're not short. And did it have a scope? I mean, was it even necessary to have a scope at 200 yards?
No, the picture I've seen shows that it did, in fact, have a scope. And so it's not a difficult shot to make, especially with that scope. It appeared to be a powerful scope. So from what I've seen, the distance was 150 yards, 150-ish. And with a good optic and even just moderate training, moderate capability, that would have been an easy shot to place on a man-sized torso. So it required no special skill, not really. In fact, had the guy been more skilled, I would have expected him to try and take a headshot, which he apparently did not do. So I'm not impressed with this guy's skill, at least in using the weapon. I'm more impressed with how he was able to get there unobserved and unstopped, and to get away unobserved and unstopped.
Well, he was observed. I saw a video of people saying, look, there's a guy up, just like Butler. Hey, man, there's a guy up there.
No, I've seen that too, but I mean, there should have been professional security people who saw that. That regular attendees saw that is a failure. Now, granted, Charlie was a private individual. He didn't necessarily have government assets at his disposal, although I do know, and we see in the footage, he's got his own private security detail, but there may be 4 or 5 guys, and maybe some other local volunteers out in the crowd trying to help. I'm sure there was campus police officers who were, doing what they could, but there was not really any way to cover that the way you would say Trump.
And Chip, I want to add in too. I remember going to Penn State University, which is just a huge. I think it's the largest university grounds in the country, actually. But this kind of plays into that. This relic could be a student, because students, you get to know the nooks and crannies of the school, and if you don't have Secret Service officially there, you could figure out how to be not observed if you just know the dynamics of where everybody is,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm convinced that whoever did this was very familiar with those grounds. And getting back to the acoustic reflectivity I mentioned earlier, I don't think this was anything that was intended by the shooter, but where they shot from created perfect chaos with this phenomenon, because they fired from a place far enough back that the first sound people heard was not the boom of the rifle going off, but the sonic crack the bullet made as it passed over everybody's heads.
Right.
That was where sound first reached them. And it creates this illusion when you first hear it. When you have a bullet fly near you, where that bullet passes you closest is where the sound appears to come from. So people might have heard something overhead and thought the gunshot came from overhead, or they might have heard it to their left because the bullet passed to their left. And that's where people would have looked. And people would have been looking in many different directions and not necessarily universally where the shot came from. Now, I'm sure there were people there who are familiar with gunfire and who did recognize what they heard, but it's not unusual that there was confusion about this. So when people say it's a second shooter or whatever, that's normal.
I want to add my experience on this. We did in the 90s. We had a Second Amendment is for everyone. Safe? Are you a safe gun owner? Are you an unsafe congressman? That kind of thing. And I remember Chip was there, and we had a bunch of politicians that come out, and even Democrats and so on, in a competition that we had with handguns one time. And one we did a long rifle, and it was like 800 yards, 600 yards. It was a long ways. And some of us went into the pit where the targets are, and you bring them down, you see where they hit, and then you put them back up. That was my first experience of, you're way far away, you're not hearing the rifle, but the crack of the supersonic bullet going overhead, you had to wear ear protection. I went back there and I didn't have it on, and I had it set, whatever, I didn't know any better, and I'm down in the pit. What the crap was that? It was loud, and it's a sonic boom by the bullet. Man, get those earphones on. Holy crap.
And the larger the projectile breaking that sound barrier, the larger the sound. And so, as you probably remember, when you're down there, people shooting the little 223 bullets were not making as much, a large crack as the ones shooting the 30 caliber bullets. Right. And inside that bowl where this took place, you had a lot of acoustically reflective material, stone, glass, concrete. And so that snap then bounces back and sounds like another snap has just happened. And so you think you hear 3, 4 firecrackers going off. Was there 2 shooters? Was there 3? That's not uncommon. And it's totally understandable that people are thinking, oh, there was more than one shooter or something like that. But what we are being presented with so far, whether it's true or not, is consistent with what appears to be on the video and audio records. So I have no suspicions about what we're being told. I'm hearing different people talk about how, oh, well, the Israelis use Mausers, and this was a Mauser, so this must have been the Jews. And I'm like, no. The Peruvians used the Mausers. The Ethiopians used the Mausers. Was it them? No. People are trying to make connections here that we don't yet have any justification to make any sort of connection.
Well, Mausers are older than World War II. Weren't they World War I, or was that the Enfields? The Mauser 30-06 is a powerful round. And it, was, until they went to 308, which is pretty much the same thing. It's a 30 caliber. They do ballistics on how big a bullet, how heavy, what's the most effective. That's why an AK-47 is like a 30 caliber as opposed to the 223. So a 30 caliber, a high-powered rifle bullet like that, I was surprised that I'm glad you gave us a schooling on body armor updates and everything now, but it's starting to become more and more, I've seen where his shirt puffed out, for when it hit, and then it kind of, like you said, spalling, it ricocheted up into his neck. We'll get more detail. I hope we get more detail. None of this freaking JFK, you're not allowed, different doctor of we had, and you don't get the truth of whatever. So this is, we'll get into a discussion later about what we can expect from the government and the FBI and so on, and who runs this thing. But anything else on, when they found the rifle, talk about how many shots were fired, how many were left, what evidence they put on it, the casings, what they said, that kind of stuff.
Well, what they mentioned was that there was a spent casing still in the chamber, and there were 3 live rounds still in the magazine. And again, that's consistent with a Mauser that has been converted to 30-06, because I used to own one. And the 30-06 is just slightly larger than the caliber this was originally designed for, which was meant to hold 5 rounds. But when you convert them to 30-06, they only hold 4. So what I'm hearing is consistent with what I personally know. So I am confident that we're hearing truthful stuff so far. Um, there's really not much more that I can really authoritatively talk about because it's only day one, and there's still a lot that's going to come out later. But I can tell you about last night when I went to Dream City Church for the event where they were eulogizing him. And my sister, you've met her. She's 8 years younger than me, and for a long time she was not overtly political at all, and she was your typical product of public schooling where she was rather liberal by default, and only like the last 8 years she's had an awakening and she's come about, and Charlie Kirk was a big part of that, and she followed him rather closely. And I had the unfortunate duty when I learned about what happened to him, I knew she was going to be devastated, so I made sure I was the one to go tell her, and of course she was devastated. She was in tears, and so when she learned that there was going to be this event there at Dream City Church, she wanted to go. And I wasn't confident that she was in a proper state of mind to drive. So I said, I'll go with you. Let's go together. And, I have not been inside a church for a very long time. I'm not a churchgoer, but neither am I hostile to religion or faith-based people at all. It's just not a thing for me. But, this was quite an experience to go there. I expected to see a glum, depressed crowd. I expected people to be very upset. That would be entirely understandable. I respected Charlie because of how effective he was. I didn't always agree with him on stuff, but I liked his style. I liked what he did. And it affected me too. And when we got there, I was surprised to see how upbeat everybody was. And maybe upbeat is kind of misleading. I merely mean to say people were not depressed. They weren't crying in their cups. It just wasn't what I expected to see. And instead what I found, there were the regulars who attend that place, of course, but then there was a lot of people like us who just showed up who wanted to show support. And among all of them, everybody seemed to be simply dedicated to recommitting themselves to being better people and making a better nation. And they were all confident that nobody had to worry about Charlie anymore. His suffering was over. He was with the Lord. Nobody was worrying about him. And they were happy to remember him. They were very concerned and sad, of course, about his family. Lots of prayers about that. But I witnessed their people becoming reinvigorated. Rather than being beaten over the head, rather than having taken a blow, they were turning that into energy. And it was something to see. And of course, you've been there, so you've seen the production values that they have when they put on a spectacle. And it was a spectacle. It was the most packed they've had that place in many years, they said. Interestingly, I also learned something there that I didn't know. Maybe you didn't know. The Dream City Church opened September 10th, 2001.
Huh.
And we know what happened the next day.
Wow.
So here we are 24 years later for this. And it was spooky.
Right.
I can't really describe it any other way. And I feel privileged to have been there for that. I felt like, I had to go not only to support my sister and be there for her, but I wanted to just witness what I knew was history happening. And it was also interesting in that because I have sort of a security person frame of mind, I was worried a little bit that what if this was not a single attack on Charlie? What if a group of Antifa people, for instance, who I suspected right away, what if somebody decided, hey, this would be a nice soft target to hit all of Charlie's friends, gathering over here? We could do something there. So as we're there, I'm looking around, I'm watching critically, and I'm observing a lot of sheepdogs, guys who are protectors, who were armed, but not openly, trying to be secret about it, trying very hard not to appear to be the sheepdogs they were, and they were everywhere. And I realized, okay, I'm safe. This place is protected.
Can you just define sheepdog?
Sheepdog is a term that we gun guys use to refer to ourselves and to others who take upon themselves the responsibility of being a protector, not just of themselves, not just of their family, but wherever they happen to be. And we've seen, as you probably know, a movement in churches in the last 10, 15 years where these attacks have occurred, that church members who feel up to the task volunteer to be these sheepdogs, and with the blessing of the pastor are armed there at church. And we've seen some of those guys unfortunately have to take action and limit the damage that these guys have done when they've tried to step up and slaughter people. And it's been effective. The few church shootings that have happened have been blessedly reduced in how bad they could have been.
You know,
So it's a positive thing.
This relayed also to hijackings, that you have a lot of ex-military that are the pilots. Well, they need a gun. Somebody's got to have a gun. Then they put marshals on or someone do the pilots that been in the Air Force for whatever, should they allowed to be armed. Then they have for teachers at schools. I'm hearing that come out of, I think even Trump said something. There's got to be somebody. It's always a good guy with a gun that stops the bad guy with the guns. How come we don't got good guy guns? You just got to target. It's like OSHA for criminals. It's a safe work environment to go and lay waste to a school. So this mindset, the solution for other countries has been to take the guns away. We saw it in Scotland. We see it in Australia. We see it in the UK. We see it. And, hell, we even got Putin telling American people, don't give up your guns, man. Just saying, So it's Utah
is one of those states where, despite being relatively red, I guess we could call it a purple state, they are one of the last ones to have some reasonable concealed carry permit solutions for people to do that. Utah continues to be a place where they just don't want to let people carry concealed, and if you do, they want you to be able to cite some sort of specific, reasonable excuse why you have to do it. So between that and the fact that people were at a university, there were a lot of people there who I think normally otherwise would have been carrying, would have been sheepdogs, but weren't allowed to be. And, I don't know if that would have made any difference, because everybody was looking to protect their family and their friends, and probably weren't looking to go chase this guy, even if they did see where he went. But, I think this guy...
Let me ask this question. Trump did a 4-minute to my great fellow Americans, and he just said some nice things about Charlie Kirk, and it was appropriate. I think he did a good job. But he also said something about his shooting at Butler, and a lot of people forget a guy was killed. There was a man protecting his family, and he was killed at this event. And we're not hearing anything. I mean, we have, everything about everything on something except the 2 assassination attempts on Trump. Nothing. I'm still not hearing any. The truth will set them free. I mean, this next year, this is a disclosure thing. This is that we expect them to do the investigations and share the results with us, be it vaccines, be it assassination attempts, be it spending, be it, UFOs. I'm done. I'm done.
I think we're going to see that here because, with Trump, everything was federal, Secret Service. Those guys are typically very close-lipped. They play things close to the vest. They don't want to share their information. But here, there's no, at least that I'm aware of, there's no federal connection or federal jurisdiction. This is going to be handled primarily by the state authorities, the local authorities. They may get help from the FBI, which is certainly appropriate. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure here for them to be open, as you say, and I think they will be. Utah does not want this sort of taint on them, and they're going to do their best to dispel it and get rid of it. And they're going to be, I predict they're going to be relatively open. I think we're going to see that.
As a Christian community and a society, the culture, as Frank would go into, is protection of individual rights, responsibility as an individual to your principles, your God, your the criteria by which you define the responsibilities of men and women. And they reference a lot Luke 22:36, where, but now if you have a purse, take it. Take your money. And also a bag, your goodies. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. This is Christ. They try and use that as saying, well, it means, I tell you what it means. It means what he said. That's what it means, is that in this fight, there is evil that we have to combat. And to think that we're going to do that disarmed, certainly in America, is stinking thinking. It's getting to the point to where I don't know how many obvious neon flashing examples we need that you're not just a sheep, where you have a guy, and this is, what was it, Carolinas or something? You have this one deranged big black guy in dreads just stab a pretty white girl from Ukraine. And people just sit there and watch her bleed out. And wow. I remember in the late 70s, early 80s, it was a big thing. You still see this guy Silva coming up every now and then, the Guardian Angels. And I was in New York City riding the subway, and it was right before John Lennon got shot. And I remember going to Central Park, for, tens, hundreds of thousands of people in Central Park honoring John Lennon getting shot. Well, at that time, there was the Guardian Angels, which is a bunch of kids. Literally kids. They're, 10, 13, 15, 16. Instead of joining a gang, they had their little maroon berets that they would go around in their T-shirts, and they called it Guardian Angels, and they were just there. They were kids were being the sheepdogs, kids. And people felt comfortable. They felt safer that they were there. For this guy, hell, at least a doctor, they didn't even have cell phones, So this is sheepdog mentality for Generation Next. It has already happened. Who could be legitimately against that? The government. They poo-pooed this like you wouldn't believe. You're so freaking not allowed. You're doing it wrong. And they weren't even armed. So I'm just, there is something, you think this is new. This is not new. This has been planned. This has been a methodology of eating out our substance and harassing the people from international directions. Any and every, America is the threat. And that's why we have that graphic all the time that says, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. They're after the world, and America's in the way. Chip, I want to make sure you express yourself, what you see the result of this, having been paying attention, with me, you're getting, I remember, you're probably, I don't know, 10 years younger than me or something, but, you're the kid when I was the kid. Till you're 40, you're a kid. And back in the day, all these things that have happened that were demonstrative of neon, we freaking told you so, but not until broadband hit the internet in about 03, 4, 5, around in there, and videos started to hit and everything, that we're starting to get people not only are aware of what's going on, but they have history to take a look at. We get to see the results of these things, how they happen, time false flags. It's Ruby Ridge, Waco, Oklahoma City, 9/11. The savings and loan bust back into the 80s and early 90s. You have the financial crisis, the Big Short, 7, 8. And what's coming? This is inevitable. You and I have been anticipating this. It's built up. Is there anything on this trajectory that's shocking to us?
Nothing shocking to me, but I will say that as Frank was mentioning earlier, he was talking about sensing that, something significant turned here yesterday, that we're at this pivot point. And I couldn't agree more. What I sense, what I feel, and I almost hate to give voice to it, but I think I need to, is people who have been affected by this were affected by this because Charlie was among the best of us. He was the best example of how to be. And when someone as unoffensive yet still firm and bold in his defense of his principles can have this happen to him, it makes you question, should we still be nice guys? There's a lot of people right now today who are saying to themselves, no more Mr. Nice Guy. Now, that's understandable, and I'm not necessarily going to say it's wrong, but it, of course, can go too far. And that's what I fear, is the people who so far have been peaceful, want to be peaceful, might now think it's over. That this is that shot across the bow, commencing hostilities. I would simply say, everybody take a breath, give it 3 weeks, like we talked about, let everything shake out that we know is going to later shake out, and just stay close to your family and think and try to remain calm. But I know people are feeling that right now, and to a degree, I'm feeling it. I don't want to go out and strike at anybody, but there's a part of me that feels that. There's a part of me that thinks no more Mr. Nice Guy. And I think we are at a potential here for that to go very wrong.
What I
want to
see
add
is
in.
the main action is this: the truth shall set them free. I am so sick of the justification, the rationalization of, well, if you knew what I knew, I shouldn't tell you what's going on. I'm like, but then what happens? This kind of stuff happens. Here it comes. Space aliens! We got ships coming, going, space aliens! And what we're finding out is that, a lot of this stuff could be our tech. Doing anti-gravity I've been covering this for a long time. We have maybe a reverse engineered alien space tech or whatever the hell, and I don't care. I want to know. Not because I give a crap, which I do. It'd be interesting. But we have to be fully informed. We have to be, for this democracy, this democratic constitutional republic, where the Democratic part elects our representative, Republic part, chained down by the Constitution part, that whole system breaks down if we are not fully informed. I am tired of being treated like a child. This is a main thing with me, and we're going to see this play out on all these other issues. One of the people that does a really good job, is Whitney Webb. She's a young woman I interviewed, and I didn't even want to talk about all the stuff that she had on they, them, those. They were ruling the world, and they're doing whatever. If it's not them, it's another guy in line and group behind them. I mean, it's not them, it's us. We're allowing this to happen. And she has been very articulate in who and what and where, and it's so thick. We have to know what's going on. We have to be told. Hell, we got to be allowed to go find out. And with the internet, that's happening. But what happens? They shut you down. The platform is not. Now, even on X, they're doing, this is too gruesome. We put a adult, you got to sign in, but whatever. And that's why we went the IPFS route, to where it can't go away. So this show and whatever we come up with, the entire Freedom's Phoenix platform is archived on our own archive, not on archive.org or whatever. It is archived on our servers and our IPFS logging of everything. And it's for this. I'm so tired. You go back to your old shows and archives of great people we've interviewed and so on. Now we have the MP3 because we had that on our own server. But any platform that we use, that we're starting to open up all our platforms and so on, our traffic has tripled in the last couple of weeks because we went ahead and started, because they've been allowing more of the libertarian mindset to go on the platforms for whatever reason, because they had to, something. But I anticipate, World War III, shut down again. Kirk, shut down again. Here it comes. And the research, just in less than 24 hours, and we can have Chip come on, Frank and I can talk about it, and we have way more evidence from 50 gazillion cameras in people's pockets. This was the beginning of that, was 9/11. You still had people that saved footage, saved, things, and that is coming out. I remind you, today, 9/11, a 4-part series, just especially if you are a subscriber to TuckerCarlsonNetwork.com, that you can go right now and watch the whole thing, which I may. And this is right away. And certainly while I'm working, I'll be listening on, Bluetooth in my ear pod kind of thing. But this is a tipping point. The turning point already happened. Then there's a tipping.
Yeah. So let me make a comment. If finish your point, Ernie.
No, go ahead. That's it.
Yeah, no, it's going to come up. I can't wait. I hate to call it memes, but I can't wait to see the shirts and the posters and the memes about that. Oh yeah, I'm sure this audience is already getting to work on it. But a comment and the questions. My comment is, the part we haven't really discussed, and we'll see how this plays out, is the left. Or maybe the silent left, the moderate left, the somewhat common sense left, and some of you that might be an oxymoron. But, there's many of them who are on the left because of their belief or maybe left-leaning. Some of them are there just out of ignorance because they just didn't really get that involved. And as we probably know, becoming just a moderate left Democrat is sort of like the default position. When you don't put much, arm power into any of this. I often say you typically see liberals who suddenly become conservatives or libertarians, but you rarely see libertarians and conservatives become liberals. Right? It doesn't really work that way typically.
How do you learn the truth?
Well, except for Liz Cheney and a few others, but we won't go there. But the moderate left, the question is going to be, how do they respond to this? I think many of them do not understand. I think they woke a sleeping giant, or a somewhat awake giant. And I think they're seeing the backlash and the response. I mean, the flag's half mast. I mean, just the outpouring. I mean, even myself, I went on my soliloquy earlier about my own family and how much we were affected more than we thought. And if we were a bit taken back by it, I can imagine the left that just looked at him as some, right-wing podcaster and didn't quite understand what it meant. I knew they saw him as a threat to the schools, many of them, but they also have been just fighting their own war in their own bubble against evil, orange man bad. But I'm curious. But I'm curious what their take is going to be, because I've said on the show for a long time, especially after Trump won the second time. I know Ernie says, I don't care, which I get it. But I really want to know what the average Democrat response is. Remember, the Democrats, in their own way, their problem is a product of their apathy, the average Democrat. Many of them sat back and they followed the lead of people like Hillary Clinton, who wound up basically using the far left, drumming up all this anger from the universities and colleges to get the young people to be the pit bulls for them. They were the activist pit bull wing. So whenever there was rallies and what have you, and activism and riots, it was always the left, right? It was the young left, because the older left people, they're not going to get out there in the streets typically as much as the young left. The young left have nothing else to do. A lot of them are unemployed and they're just angry. Whereas conservatives tended to be taking care of their families. They didn't have time to go out and go protest all the time. I mean, yes, there was some pro-life protests, but that was about, like for every pro-life protest, there'd be like 20 from the left. And so they just kind of got comfortable with that. But now, the left, by allowing the far left to take over, and then the AOC shows up, and she was just this curiosity. But now all of a sudden, you have Omar, and now you've got the new possible governor of the mayor of New York, communist there. So you're seeing the takeover of the Democrat Party, of the far left, to the point where they had struggles of who to run for president. I mean, who are they now? And I've talked about on the show, which I know drives already crazy, but to me, it's a key part, because power hates a vacuum. And the left, or whoever they are, will become, is important. Whether they rebrand as something different than a Democrat, maybe the Democrat Party splits, what's going to happen? And I wonder if this event with Charlie Kirk winds up being a factor that perhaps tells the Democrat mainstream, the silent majority, those that are the common sense Democrats, to respectfully the stating, is, do they say, maybe we have to just cut loose from these guys on the left. Look what they're turning into, and they're dragging us down. They know they're an internal threat to their own movement, but then again, it's like, well, they don't know how to win against the evil Trumpers without the far left, who did a lot of the heavy lifting. But at what cost? What are you bringing upon them? If the destruction of New York City and everybody leaves, and now you've got these trans people, if it becomes an issue of if they have mental, I mean, technically as a doctor, it is a mental disability. I mean, it's still in the code books. If you're trans or you believe you're in the wrong body, that's considered a medical condition. It's not normal. They keep trying to change that, but it's still it's a medical condition, psychological issue. And now if people are they're shooting places up, I'm not trying to use just a couple bad apples for the bunch, as always. I mean, you don't want to go down that path, but at the same time, I think this is going to be a shakeup, and the left is going to have to make a decision whether they keep doubling down for that community and what it represents and everything tied to it. Remember, this goes beyond just trans, obviously. It's everything tied into it. Anyway, that's my comment. Quick question for Chip before we lose you. Again, it was an honor to have you on the show, especially for today. But do you have any thoughts, not to switch categories too much, but I brought it up twice earlier about the Nevada shooting. Is there any movement on that at all, or is there any insight or anything at all? I still get angry how lack of interest that even the left, the right media has on that since Trump got in. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole other conversation, and us gun guys who pay attention to those sort of things, yeah, we keep our ear to the ground waiting to hear more about it too, but that's essentially been shut down. There's nothing new to learn, because whatever there was to learn, they've pretty much hidden and flushed away forever. But on what you were just speaking about, let me say, just this morning, as I was going on the internet and looking to see what people were saying, I encountered some of those moderate Democrats you were just talking about who are ashamed at this, and they're flabbergasted at the celebratory crap that's being put out by their more radical brothers in the party. And I think we are going to see some of those people realize that they have to do something about that within their ranks.
Yeah.
I think we are going to see that. I think you're on point for this.
There was a lot of comments that you see in the comment sections as you're going around and I haven't spent a lot of time on it. We've been busy. And the comments, yeah, they just, it was a false flag. Oh, the MAGA movement did this to make us look bad. They, whatever conspiracy, which, possible. I have no idea. But, Donna said something that kind of surprised me. She said, well, that they're already starting this, and the bots and so on are making these comments and everything, and, is it too fast? Did they do it? I can't believe they're just right away. I'm going, it's AI, trolls, bots. Hell, they just got to push a button, man. They'll flood comments with all kinds of crap. Here it comes. So how do you discern what is and is not a valid comment? How do you do it? You have to have principles. You have to have some filter by which, not only whether it's, a robot, whether it's a paid troll, whether it's a movement, a NGO, if we got a bunch of money to go and infiltrate the comment section. But we've been through this. We went through it during the Levolution. We've been through it through everything. And those that are immune to a lot of this stuff, which is Charlie Kirk and his followers, one of my son-in-laws was affected by this. He's, his late 30s, and it was like, whoa, this, because he, like you were saying about Savarda, you had no idea how much they watch this stuff. And, Charlie Kirk is everywhere. And it's just, a comment or an exchange with a college student or what. This is what had the impact. This is the threat that he represented. The counter to that.
I have also been hearing yesterday I was also hearing a whole lot of people, mostly on the left, talking about how, we all spend too much time online. We do too much doom scrolling. We got our noses on our phone too much. And that's a valid criticism. But, our phones, our computers are how we keep in touch with everything that's going on today. But I do think as you've seen just in the last few months, this explosion of AI entertainment content, the animations, the films that look like real people, but they're not real people, has brought home the fact that we can no longer believe what we see. And a whole lot of what we do when we're online is we're just looking to see what we can see. What looks to me like it's true? What looks to me like it's something I want to know about? But now if you can't believe what you see, yeah, if you cannot believe what you see, and there's similar technology, you can't necessarily believe what you hear, should you even be watching and listening? Well, that's another counter argument. You can go too far with that. But I think we're at this inflection point where, as a society, we all need to start asking ourselves, what am I consuming? What am I looking at? What do I believe? Who do I listen to? And this is all occurring right around the same point as this thing today. So I think it's interrelated.
When we started Freedom's Phoenix, I said, I do the 3 weeks thing or the 3 minutes thing. I was saying we need to have a platform. This is before Facebook we started in 05. And my point was, you don't really know what the hell's going on until after time goes and you get some vetted, people you trust, the future is about credibility, that kind of thing. But it's also, you got a smartphone. It's a 13-year-old kid that was standing there that got the actual detonation, the crater that was involved, the suicide bomber the guy on the roof, this is what those really, I don't know if they expect it or they want to control it or they want to have a bill to change in the surveillance and the censorship of the world. Of course they do. Because why? Because people are there. They see it. They witness it. And they push the button and boom, it's up on X. This is, why it's so important for free speech, for us to be informed. What are we waiting on? The FBI to say it was something? The FBI said, and I heard this during COVID, well, if you don't believe the CDC and the WHO, well, then we can't have a conversation. Well, we ain't talking because I don't care what they say. I don't believe what they say. And we're starting to find this out. We are evolving into not just more informed, but demanding information. We are not believing it because, well, it must be like wag the dog. Well, it's over. It must be true. I saw it on television. Well, then we're starting to find out for the first time in human history that all of the broadcast news, all of the controlled media, all of this FCC licensed whatever are influenced by they, them, those, which includes a what? Trump just came out and said, we're going to be, a lot of other countries have this same prohibition on pharmaceutical companies doing so much television advertising. And what they have is they got people doinging around in the fields, and this is great and wonderful. Ask your doctor. Nobody goes and asks their doctor about hell. Half the time, I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. They just throw up a logo of some new, remdesivir or whatever. And I'm going, who goes and orders stuff from what? It's bribery. It's just the mechanism by which pharmaceutical companies get money, gazillions of dollars, billions, into not being covered by the media. Oh, you start putting up some RFK Jr. stuff and studies, well, you don't get so much advertising money from the pharmaceuticals there, boy. And same thing with Congress. So we are becoming, I think, the tipping point. It was, Russ Tavares, who did that, a friend of ours. That guy goes, tipping point, USA. And I'm going, yep, here we go. And it is the responsibility of, in Dancing with Wolves, the Kevin Costner movie about Native Americans and the plains and whatever, after the Civil War. And it was interesting that the Lakota Sioux, their highest attained state was to be a human being. Now you got to identify what that meant to them, but they were going, no, are you a human being? What does that mean? I don't know, not a psychopath, not a sociopath, have empathy, take care of yourself, your family, your tribe. I mean, it's got to be a human being. This is what I see coming, and I'm old enough to remember the impact of Promise Keepers. Promise Keepers in the 90s, it was a big, I mean, they were filling stadiums, 800,000 people in Washington, and them, though, didn't like it none too much, but it was apolitical. They didn't want to be political. Well, they wanted to make them political. Well, with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, it became political. And that was the result of, I don't know, the need, the desire for us to, once more into the breach, we're going to vote harder this time. And until they fixed Chip knows me for a long, that was my thing. It was always election fraud. That the whole thing, he went through this with me from the beginning. He was on the gun issues, but my thing was, how do they get away with all this stuff? It was elections. They controlled the elections. You may choose from communist candidate A list and fascist candidate B list. I mean, you're going to be ruled, and those are going to do it from the all-seeing eye on top of the left, right side of the pyramid. It doesn't matter. That's the turning point. That's the tipping point to where I do not think we better not be complacent waiting for ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS to tell us what's up. It's now. It's so freaking not later. Now, as in not later.
I have a question, Chip. Do you see any changes? Two-part question. First is, how much are we seeing a growth in gun ownership or new gun ownership? And number two, do we see more from the left? I mean, it's great that the left will get into guns. I always said the more that Democrats would fire guns, they might become more libertarian conservative, but we're starting to see militant groups. Is there a spike that I'm not following that? What do you think?
The answer is yes on both points. And a big part of that was the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, there were people who didn't know what sort of violent anarchy might happen out in the streets. And so there were a lot of liberals who might otherwise not have been gun owners who went out and got their first gun. And so many people were doing that, it was actually difficult to get yourself one because a lot of the gun shops were closed, like so many other things were closed. And but in addition to that, separately, this whole Antifa movement has been one that, for different reasons, has been motivating the more radical liberals who might become part of Antifa to arm up because they believe in their delusion that we're all a bunch of Nazis and we're going to hunt them down and kill them, so they better be able to defend themselves. Well, hey, I advocate that they be as able to defend themselves as I am able to defend myself. What they ultimately end up doing, though, who knows? That remains to be seen. But yes, there are more liberals owning guns these days.
So, and again, obviously, none of us want to just overgeneralize everything, but the new owners, the liberal owners, are they educated gun owners? Are they taking gun classes, or are they just buying them out of anger? Do you have? I don't know.
Well, that's a little unknown. There is some indication that they've been responsible about it and they've sought education, but then they were in a quandary because who do they get that education from? Well, the typical gun guy that they might learn from is usually politically opposed to them, and they don't trust him. They don't want to talk to him. So who do they go to? It actually did foster a lot of conversations of people crossing the aisle to meet each other and talk to each other. But how many people didn't bother to do that and are just in their own bubble? We don't really know.
There's one story that Chip told me. I remember during COVID, you were at a tell this story. I remind you what it was. You were at a gun shop.
When the news about the pandemic. When the news about the pandemic really, when it first hit, and people were beginning to realize that there were probably going to be shortages, and that this might be some sort of societal pause or upheaval. Different people responded different ways. Different people were concerned about different things. But I just happened to be, thank God, shopping for some gun materials, some reloading powder and bullets. So I ended up at Cabela's, a big box store for gun stuff. And I just happened to be in there on a day when people were reacting and doing panic buying. And as you recall, this was on the run up to the next election. We in the gun societies figured there was going to be some panic buying where people might become not confident that Trump was going to win. But I expected we were still a couple months out from that. So I didn't expect a panic buying yet. But I walked in there and the shelves were bare where there should have been a lot of product. And I started asking about this and I started asking about that. And they were saying, yeah, we had some this morning, but it's gone. We might get some next week. And I thought, oh, crap, it's happening again. Because what had happened back in 2012 from the Newtown shooting, there was this panic because Obama was in office that we were going to get a whole bunch of new gun control. So people went out and they did panic buying then. And the number one thing that disappeared off the shelves was .22 ammunition. Long story as to why that happened, but that's what happened. And you couldn't get .22 ammunition for a couple of years.
$70 a box that cost $14. You go to the gun show, so, it was $70.
Yeah, so there I am in Cabela's. The shelves are going bare again. I'm like, oh my God, it's happening again. But the difference was this time I had a smartphone. And I could immediately go online and tell everybody I knew, hey, I'm here now. Here's what's happening. Here's what I see. And by the end of the day, the panic buying that took a couple weeks back in 2012 happened by the end of the day. So,
the other story, the one story that I remember, I think it was you you were at a gun store. There was a line. Some guy shows up liberal in his Corvette or whatever, wants to get in front of the line. And he finds out the people go, hey, we're here to pick up our guns, had our 3-day waiting period to do that. You got to get in line, some bitch. Well, I got tons of money. And
that's right.
Matter. Tell that story.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. And that was the same day I'm telling you about. I was there looking for what I could get. And there was a line of people there waiting to be helped. They all had different purchases. It was all gun related. And this one guy who you could just tell, he was some self-important, well-to-do guy from Scottsdale. You could just tell by the way he dressed and from what he drove, the rings he had on his fingers, that he was not the kind of guy to stand in line. He was not the kind of guy to be second fiddle. And rather than wait in line, he just pulled out this wad of cash. And he walked up to the counter and he says, look, this is what I need. He says, I'll pay the price. I got cash here. I'm the king, basically. I think he even said that. I think he said, I'm the king. And the guy at the counter, who could tell that he was one of those people that had caused our lives over the years to be such hell, wasn't about to give this guy any special treatment. And he says, no, sir, you're going to have to go back into the line. Everybody else is here before you. We only help people as they come. And he was incensed. How dare we not take his money? How dare we treat him like any other guy? And I mean, it was a little tense, and I didn't smile or laugh at the moment. But when he stormed out and decided he was going to go somewhere else, everybody there in line, we all looked at each other. We didn't have to say a word. We all just had that smirk on our face like, oh, he's just figuring it out, huh?
Yeah, now you get it. Now that was one thing also. A lot of the people, do we still have that 3-day waiting handgun thing?
There is a federal law that there is a waiting period unless your state background check system is able to be compliant within certain parameters and you can do the instant check right away. But if, for instance, the instant background check system is down and not functioning, which occasionally happens, then yes, you have to wait the 3-day wait period and all that. Now, interestingly, in Nevada right now,
I bought my gun 3 days ago. I'm in line to get it, and some bitch, you get back in line, and they didn't like it.
It's funny you bring this up because in Nevada right now, back in late August, their instant background check system got hacked, and it's not working. 2 weeks later, it's still not working. But Nevada, separate from the federal law, also passed their own state law saying you cannot get a purchase from a retail outlet unless you clear that background check system. So nobody has been able to purchase from a retail outlet in 2 weeks in Nevada. That's going on right now.
Wow.
We went through when they did. Okay, I'm going to give some history on this that Chip and I experienced. During the 90s, when they were advocating for doing this background check thing, this is NRA. You know, National Republican Apologists, man. They're just political. I got no love for the NRA. Well, what happened was, this is when we had SAFE, Second Amendment was for everyone. We had the Libertarian Second Amendment caucus, and we were really hammering this, thing. In the 94 election cycle, they had, well, we got to vote for this kind of gun control, or the Democrats will beat us over the head with it and they'll win. We need Republicans to win. And this is when John Kyle went from the House of Representatives to Arizona's U.S. Senator. The NRA came. They had at a Best Western, whatever, a big conference room. They set up like stadium seating on two sides of this big room, and they were in the middle, and they invited us. And I go, look, I'm not coming as a libertarian. You're freaking, communist, whatever the hell. But I will come representing SAFE. And Mike Duggar, a good friend, he was a postal carrier and a good libertarian friend of ours, ran the Libertarian Second Amendment Caucus, which was started by L. Neil Smith, which is a science fiction writer, prominent libertarian guy. And so we're there representing. They come in, they go, now we just got to let this assault weapon ban thing go. We got to do it because we need to win, kind of take this issue away from the Democrat-Republican thing. And we're going, what the crap? So when they passed it, it just pissed me off. I'm 3 o'clock in the morning at our workshop, our headquarters, and I'm making these big Sieg Kyle with blood dripping swastika on it, Sieg Kyle, and taking pictures, because this is before the internet, really was getting going. It takes half hour to download a JPEG. Crap. So what we did is we took pictures of all those signs that we put around, went down to the Photoshop, had them make a bunch of copies out, and we're passing them everywhere. Then the NRA had a big gathering here in Phoenix that was G. Gordon Liddy and Charlton Heston, there, and we had Bob, I'll pay for this. We had an airplane pulling a sign, circling, saying, welcome to the Gun Banner Barbecue. Then we're taking pictures of all the people going, they did not like us. What happened is Gun Owners of America saw that we were getting safe legislation passed. He had votes on unrestricted concealed carry. All that started with our activism. And what happened was you could see that the Republicans and them, they were embracing gun control. Not only that, they would have lobbyists here that they don't even lobby here in Arizona anymore, or haven't for a long time. I don't know if they are now, but at the time, they were creating gun control so they could be against it. We got this, it passed committee. Oh, you're really going to need us lobbyists to help you with the gun thing, because they passed in committee this gun control effort that we had them right, by the way. And it was that kind of crap constantly. And only the libertarians were outing this kind of stuff, and it's the same impact that like Charlie Kirk has. They're outing what's really going on. You have to shut that down. And it was generational. This focus on Generation Next, the college campuses, that had lifetime, decades, generations of impact into the future, and they're coming up into the midterms. So I'm wondering if this had anything to, and it's going to backfire. It's bad, but you have to have control of the elections. If you do have this mail-in voting crap, you got all this just set up that, well, they're going to say, well, it's because of the guns. We haven't seen the anti-gun effort yet. They're going to do something with something, because they always do. They don't know any better. Now, I am of the opinion that at that time, the NRA was advocating for a 3-day wait. Oh, and the FBI that has this gun check, this check that you bought a gun, put you on a list, and we go, no, hell no. We're not having a list of Second Amendment kind of, no. We'll keep it private. We'll purge it. We'll eliminate everything. We go, who do you think you're talking to? Are you kidding me? Of course they don't eliminate that list. That was the promise, though. Then we had Larry Pratt was at our headquarters along with Sheriff Richard Mack, which at the time was still sheriff. They came and did a presentation outside. We had like a balcony area, a second story where our workshop was, and a big crowd. And I just went there last night. We were at the football. I went by there just to see, just nostalgia, to go see what's up with that place. And they would talk to everyone, and Larry Pratt from Gun Owners of America, no 3-day waiting, no, we're not for that. But as libertarians, we just had gotten our first email accounts. Keep in mind, this is 93, 94. We got our email accounts, and where do you find your people? Where do you find your peeps? Well, we just go, Bill of Rights. We go First Amendment advocacy, Second Amendment, boom, you find these lists everywhere. And it was AZRKBA, Right to Keep and Bear Arms. It was sponsored by one of the staff at Arizona State University, so you could have an Arizona State University email list. And that was one of the guys. He became a big activist, and ASU didn't like it none too much. But on there, were libertarians like Chip, myself, Bob, Mike. We were, Michael Kilsky was attorney and computer geek and state chair. And we were there. Ooh, we're giving the libertarian view on this. We found out how they used the Second Amendment crowd and why PGP encryption became a thing, so you know who it came from. Knox, which was a board member on the NRA, right before the election, they go, oh, well, Knox said vote for this one, and it wasn't him. He's like, whoa, hell no, that one. I've seen them do everything. When Larry Pratt was here, we found in libertarians that were in Connecticut that they had Gun Owners of America endorsing the 3-day wait. And we showed Larry, I go, hey, man, you think you got control of everybody, but look what they're doing in your name in Connecticut. And he's like, what the shit? Boom. He's on the phone and kind of, taking care of business there. So we've been at the beginning of this from forever. And that's one of the benefits of being old, man. I've seen the cycles. I've seen the mechanism. I've seen who they, them, those are. It's everybody everywhere, and it's all selling your soul for whatever the hell they think they get benefit, and we got to have some gun control to be against and get our numbers up. Well, they had a thing to where you had free postage to send them donations, and they would send it out to all the Life members. Well, Bob was a Life member. He's going, all right, I get all their stuff, see what's up. When they started doing all this and for the 3-day thing, a lot of the Life members, because they had postage paid envelopes, so you put stuff in and send it. The campaign, they put in a bunch of washers, anything that added weight, and they would send it, and then the NRA had to pay the postage to receive it. So it was costing them money because NRA lifetime members were sending in weights in the envelope just to make them pay for it. Then we had the teabagging thing. There was, called GOLF, Gun Owners Liberation Front. We had the front 9 and the back 9 cell structure. It was just having fun. Well, Mike Duggar, grew a beard, and when he had vacation time from the post office, and he was a letter carrier, and he had this beret and sunglasses and a bandolier, like you across your chest, and it was golf tees instead of bullets. And we had, give the Republicans the balls to repeal the assault weapon ban. Well, what it was a poster of an elephant looking back at his butt, and we had the handle of a 44 Magnum that was Bob's, and it was nailing in the golf tee with a ankle stocking, just a little nylon ankle stocking that women wear for ankles, and it had 2 golf balls in it. So giving them the balls. Well, the campaign is everybody, because he was a postal carrier, he knew how to do it. You take and you put 2 golf balls in this little ankle stocking that looked like a scrotum with balls in it, and you put a mail tag on it, you pay the postage, and you send it to the Hart Building to your senators in Washington. So they're getting a ton of these balls to give them the balls to repeal the assault weapon ban. So then later, 101 Things to Do Till the Revolution was a book written by, what was her name? Claire Wolfe. Claire Wolfe was a writer, freedom oriented, and she had in there all the different things, 101 things to do, not do, whatever, till the revolution. 2 of those things in there was safe, some of the stuff we were doing, and this scrotum mailing of balls to Washington thing, and it exploded. This is the kind of stuff that we've been doing forever. Why? General public opinion. I keep saying this. Your resistance is not futile, but you got to get involved. And now it's memes. It is the meme war of man freaking penetrating, and they don't like it none too much. And if you forward one, hell, now in the UK, if you even look at it, they're ready to arrest you. So we're at this tipping point of, I'm so glad that Chip and I, and Frank, later on, that we have this personal, been there, done that, got shitloads of T-shirts on what we have done building up to this to create the atmosphere, and the spontaneous order of the Levolution was definitely a starting point for a lot of people in this. And that was the consistency of the message of freedom of Ron Paul, and adding, and he was Christian. That had a big impact on Donna. Cured her apathy. Here's a good Christian man using the Constitution and the principles of what this country was about and founded on. And then here comes Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk embraced that. He didn't shy away from it, and he went to the campuses. He checked off a bunch of boxes that they, them, those, hell no. So God knows how and what and who and really responsible and how, and then the cartridges, I'm looking here, I saw it somewhere, I can't find it now, but there was a list of the phrases that were on the cartridges in this Mauser that they found, in a bush in the wood. I mean, seriously, they wanted it found. So they have in there, it was, trans stuff, Antifa, whatever. Do you know what was written on the cartridges, Chip?
No, I've not yet seen pictures of that. But in the last two trans shooter events that we've heard about or seen, they've done exactly that. They've written messages on their guns, on their shirts, on their ammo magazines. So this seems to be consistent with that.
Yeah, Christchurch thing in New Zealand. Same kind of thing. They had whoa, you're not even allowed to look at video. You're not allowed, because they found so many holes in it. They were so sloppy with that they're like, nope, nothing to see here. Then the Las Vegas shooting, nope, nothing to see here. This whole thing, I want full disclosure. I'm done. I'm bitching about the JFK, promise that Trump made in his first administration he didn't do, and Frank and I went on about that. And now, and even Frank's doing the, Epstein files. Is it about this, saving the children and everything? Yeah, there's a lot of that in there, but it demonstrates who really runs this country, which means what? Our pocketbook. The trillions and trillions, and then you have Thomas Massey coming out and going, yeah, the reason I didn't vote for the big, beautiful bill, it adds more debt. What the hell? We are under attack in the most effective way possible. They're taking away our freedom in the form of options that a wealthy populace has. We have the option to move, the option of buying, the option of preparing, the option of building, they need to take that away. Because if we don't have the option, you're just sheep to the slaughter, which is where comes the sheepdog. There are people that not only feel the responsibility for themselves, but to even all the other ne'er-do-wells that are freaking, populate the cannon fodder of, I'm going to be here and protect you too, because damn it, you need protection, but you better get off your ass, because here it comes. Did I lose you guys?
Yep, we're here.
No, I'm here. Well,
I get to talk more? Okay, I can do that.
No, I mean, we're used to letting you just run and run. I was kind of surprised to hear you stop.
This is, before you go, Chip, I wanted to ask you this. In your experience, you and I have been doing this a long time. We've had our experiences with the FBI and the DOJ and the alphabet soup army of Dave.
You're not allowed. Day. So I just figured that would mess up your accuracy. I mean, what if you catch something and I know it's the casing, not the bullet, but I don't know. I was just wondering, is that something that's a thing? I never even knew that.
Oh, it is with them. They want to send a message. They wanted it found. What, you think he didn't want it found? What the hell did he write on the casing for? You know, these guys go in with all kinds of crap written on their guns and everything. I mean, it feels
I know written on the
manufactured.
guns. I just never heard on the casing. I figured if you do anything to the brass, there's a good chance it may not, fire properly or something. Again, this is definitely a chip question.
Well, we first of all need to remember, of course, that the initial reporting is not always accurate. So it might not have been etched. It may have simply been written with a marker or something like that, and then somebody reported it as etched. I'm more inclined to think somebody probably wrote on some cartridges with a permanent ink marker. That's a pretty common thing. So, that's probably all it is.
Yeah, it's just like congressmen going to the Kremlin, kind of thing on bombs and crap like that. It's the same kind of crap. And of all the things that we speculate now, what I hope that has come across is that on 9/11, that we have this understanding that we have to take responsibility as individuals to get fully informed. And you have to have the mechanism by which to fully and accurately express your opinion at the ballot box. If you're going to have a ballot box, which has been my thing, I haven't voted since 2002. Even in 2008 election for Ron Paul, I wrote a write-in thing, a sheet that I made up, and my ID number, my voter kind of, and I just went in, got my voting packet, put that on top, handed it back, and walked out. And they go, it's not going to count. I go, it already did. F you. I don't give a crap what you guys say. I don't trust the system. And until they convince me that they got this system, voting is not going to do it. You're not going to vote yourself free. We need the information. I'm a big transparency guy now. That's it. The truth will set him. I got the website. We'll have fun with it and play with it and build up to it and art. And I'm taking my time because we got until the midterms. But I'm telling you, this is going to be a thing with me because I don't see any other way out of this. I just don't want to be lied to again. How many times have we been lied to? And they don't even care if you find out the truth later, as long as they got one more election cycle. And
so let me ask Chip. So what do you think about the efficacy or reliability of the NRA? I mean, I've heard mixed things about them. Have they been captured as a group? Do you still trust them? Would you give money to them? Or are there other groups that you think are more freedom-oriented?
Well, I was of the opinion decades ago that they were captured. I'm trying to remember the guy who was most responsible for that. Anyway.
Wayne LaPierre.
They were no, not Wayne LaPierre. He was the tax guy, short, round fellow who led the Taxpayers Union. Anyway, the point is, as we've seen, anytime you get a group of politically active people together, there's always somebody else from the outside who wants to co-opt that for their purposes. And that's what the NRA was to various branches of the Republican movement. And it was the guys who wanted to steer tax policy who looked at the NRA and said, well, here's voters who have this one issue thing, but if we can capture them to steer and vote for our guys who are all about the tax thing, we'll do whatever we have to do. And that finally came home to roost when Wayne LaPierre's corruption was exposed. And I'd been screaming at the top of my lungs to my other fellow gun guys about this for decades. But finally, about 5 years ago, he gets exposed, and everybody begins to go, oh, the NRA is corrupt. I'm like, that's what I have been telling you. So then, and a smart move, they started looking, well, where else can we put our activism? Who else can we organize with? And they went with GOA. And now there's pressure on GOA to be co-opted, which they're resisting so far, thank God. But the NRA has been trying to repackage themselves, remarket themselves, and they may ultimately actually do so in an honest fashion. I don't yet know, and I'm not yet going to pass judgment on them. But so far, I'm not prepared to say that they have properly reformed themselves, but they are going through the motions of attempting to do so. We'll see if it's genuine. So I reserve judgment.
Wait, Ernie, before. So who would you recommend? Is there a group that you respect more than the NRA at this point?
At this point, GOA, yes.
GOA, okay, GOA. Thank you.
Gun Owners of America. Yeah. There was a JPFO, Jews for the Preservation of Firearm Ownership, which was Aaron Zellman, which passed away. And before he passed away, it was, now it's, they're playing Republican. But before he passed away, he and L. Neil Smith, which was a hardcore libertarian Second Amendment guy, worked together a lot, wrote books. And his whole thing was, he was famous for releasing the Gun Control Act of 68 or so. After RFK Jr. is when they had a lot of this gun control. They need, gun control, of course. And what he found out was this. There was a Nazi gun control law that was written, and when they had the Nuremberg trials and it became available, and there was a guy that was one of the attorneys that later became a congressman that introduced it, and what JPFO had done, never again, to him, as a Jew, I'm not getting on the cattle car. Hell no, I got my gun. You would think that Jews have been captured in this gun control thing. Like, all of a sudden, gun control is going to put them on the cattle car. Hell, taking all the guns is what puts you on the cattle car. Freaking stupid. So what Aaron Zellman did is he published a book that had the 67, 68 Gun Control Act and the Nazi bill, and it was translated on one side, the Nazi version, and the American version, and it was verbatim. It was the same bill. It was the same thing. Turn the page, same thing. Turn the page, same thing. How far off am I, Chip?
No, you're very close. You're talking about the 1938 Gun Control Act of Nazi Germany. And yeah, the 1968 Gun Control Act was almost verbatim, but it was obviously very inspired by the 1938 Nazi gun control law. It was probably 95% exactly the same.
So this is where JPFO
they eliminated the
from.
references to Jews and races and all that, but the effect was registered everything exactly the same way.
So that's what they've been going for. This goes back to they, them, those since for freaking ever. You got IBM providing the punch cards to identify all the Jews and it's the same crap. The technology. Now we got what? Palantir with Teal. I'm going. It's the same thing.
I'm very upset that not enough people are upset about Palantir. That should be scaring the pants off of everybody.
So we are in the same, and I'm just old enough to remember and to see the progression of this. And fortunately, with the internet and people like us and others that know the history, that see this kind of stuff, and to have a young woman like Whitney Webb come out and do this research to identify the money, the flow, the corporations, the companies, the relationships, same kind of thing Richard Grove has done, with his stuff on tragedyandhope.com, and James Corbett doing the history on it, but I've always been, I get it. I've known this stuff for decades, so I keep pressuring, going, and now what? Okay, what's the now what? Now what? The information's out there. The truth is out there. That was one thing Peter Schiff, I think it was, that said during the financial crash in 08, 9, around after that campaign. He goes, there is a truth button on your keyboard. It's right there. All you got to do is push it. Of course, there's a bunch of crap out there, but if you want to know the truth, it'll set you free. Go look for it. It's there. It's just what they, them, those have done, especially using academics, using schools, public education system, and definitely the universities, is they have made it unpopular to even look. Or you just got to read your little red book of Mao, how we're going to take over. And you have like Yuri What's-His-Face that was interviewed by G. Edward Griffin back in the early 80s, that defected from Russia, came over, and there's a big, long interview. He's going, look, let me tell you exactly how they're going to do it to you. It's education. We are going to come in, and they're going to, 2 + 2 is 5. Get over it. We are at, and the point of this show today that I wanted to emphasize is the responsibility that each of us have to ourselves and our families and our community. And you can expand that community to whatever the hell you want it to be. Your country, your whatever. The principles that Ron Paul was espousing all his career. I remember in 08 he was saying, he goes, if we don't do this now, we're not even going to remember what these words mean. Freedom is slavery. It's going to be Orwellian crap. And then what did George Orwell say? He goes, the only cure to this is not let it happen. I mean, seriously, people. So and I'm glad I remembered the Promise Keeper thing. I remember how impactful that was in the late 90s by that time, and how they had the integrity to walk away from a big potential movement that was going to be co-opted. But they didn't have the internet. They didn't have the internet to be able to immediately share with people what was going on. And we experienced that power in the mid-90s when Chip and I were doing a lot of this activism with email lists. Before the trolls, before the bots, before, all this was automated and going after. It was amazing what information we could get from other activists that knew, that were standing there, that were in the hearings, that went to speak at even Chip had done this. There was a piece of legislation about the adjutant general, which is the relationship between the governor and the military, how they were trying to take over the militia. I want you to tell that story, because when he did that and he brought it up, the adjutant general ran up to the dais where the legislators whispered in their ear and they pulled the bill. Tell that story, Chip.
Well, what that was, it's been a while, so I'm not sure if I remember it exactly, but basically, you have the unorganized militia and the organized militia described in the law. And, the organized militia is essentially the National Guard.
And the unorganized militia.
Yeah, and the unorganized militia is just you and me and the average citizen who is capable of bearing military service. So the bill had been written to say that, okay, any militia training in the state of Arizona had to be authorized by and approved by, submitted in some way to the adjutant general. And that was essentially it. There was a little bit more wordage to that. There might have been a couple other things in there, but that was essentially it. And because he did not specify whether it was the organized militia or the unorganized militia, then supposedly that could mean that if you were caught out in the desert, you and your buddies training for some future eventuality, just because you're a prepper and you're a survivalist and you're just a little worried, but you're not planning anything, supposedly you could have been arrested for not submitting your plan to the adjutant general, and you were not authorized to be doing what you were doing. They were going to try and use this to crack down on undesirable groups who had wrongthink and that sort of thing. And I spotted that, and I said, wait a minute, this is written so poorly it can't possibly hold up in court, but somebody's going to have to be the test case to fight it if it gets passed, and it's going to be tragic, and, we need to fight this. This is wrong. And so we did. We went down there to mention it, and the moment anyone noticed it, which they didn't think anybody would, they panicked. You're like, oh, crap.
No, I saw it.
Wow.
I was there. Chip got up and started his presentation on this. It was on the docket of that committee of whatever the hell. And the adjutant general got up and almost sprinted to behind where the legislators behind their desk were, whispered in their ear, oh, we're pulling that. Well, what the shit just happened?
Because the way the law read before that, and still does, is that, the organized militia is merely the unorganized militia upon being called into government service. So you're not under jurisdiction of the military until you're called. So it has to be a draft or something like that. If you're not drafted, if you're not inducted, well, then you're not under their jurisdiction. And they were just trying to steal jurisdiction, essentially, is what they were doing.
Well, this is what happened. One of the safe things that we did, Second Amendment for everyone, started off, we were sitting in Shooter's World conference room. And we were sitting there. They go, well, you do this initiative for concealed carry, unrestricted concealed carry. And we had a newspaper called Citizens Take an Initiative. We print up all our stuff, and we're being buttheads. Well, what happened was they go, well, you need a PAC, a political action committee, so that we can, fund, do, whatever. So we're going, all right, what are we going to call it? Well, Rick Tompkins, that was the state chair and ran for president, Libertarian in 96 against Brown. And he goes, well, they had something about FAPE. It was is for everyone, free something. And he goes, well, just call it SAFE. Second Amendment is for everyone. I go, oh, that's awesome, man. We'll do that. That's how SAFE started. The Southern Poverty Law Center picked up on that PAC, and then they made their list that they sent to all law enforcement around the country. And because the only state that started with A, Arizona, their targeted SAFE, had a political action committee and initiative for this. So on top of the list was SAFE and me. Sheriff Arpaio calls me and he goes, hey, Ernie, because we had known each other from whatever. And he goes, hey, Ernie, man, you're on top of my list. I got, we're going to get some. And I go, woo, we made it. Looks like we made it. So that was, we had people from around the world. We had German television coming, the Japanese. Everybody wanted to come talk, kind of militia thing. And it was this kind of stuff that we knew that they were trying to take over the militia. So what we did is the Arizona Constitution said, I don't know what it says now, they keep changing, but it said then, it goes, all men between the ages of 17 and 35, 45 or whatever are part of the unorganized militia. That's what it said, okay? So we changed it. We knew these reporters and press and politicians, they never read it. They don't know what the hell it says. So what we did is we changed two words. We put all willing able-bodied men and women. So we did, no, we're not going to have slave. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So one, it was voluntary, willing, and we added women. They freaked. It was all these militia crazy people, militia crazy people. And we let them go for about 3 days. And this was, at the time, I think I had the restaurant then. And they were, on the air. They go, I think it was Chip that goes, hey, Ernie, man, you need to call in. KTAR, man, they're getting ready to out your restaurant. And kind of go, good, more advertising. I don't give a crap. So I called in, and it was Ernie, oh, Mr. Hancock, well, you know what? And I go, it already says this, that it's all able-bodied men. Well, we didn't want to make it compulsory. We're libertarians. So it's willing, and we're all equal rights, women, so willing and women got added. What's your problem? I hate when libertarians do that shit. You guys suckered us again. You opportunists. Then we had Barry Young, all these guys. Well, they're just opportunists. They tricked us one more time. They're so predictable. So then when you put in Ernest Hancock CNN and it'll blow up all over your browser, okay? Obama had come to Arizona and doing something about health care or whatever, and the Republicans, and they had the Democrats, Republicans on the side of the street, ouch, quit it, back and forth. Well, we went down. We had our first mobile unit that we could interface with a smartphone, and we could do live when I had a live show on LRN and the Republic Network. I was on a bunch of different networks, and we had a live show from the protest, and there were a bunch of people there armed, including one of my sons and one of his friends, and a bunch of people. Well, what had happened is the week before they had the same kind of thing, a rally in New Hampshire. William Kostrick was a guy from Arizona that moved part of the Free State Project, was just standing on the sideline with a gun. Well, New Hampshire's open carry, and they made a big deal. Chris Matthews, MSNBC, crazy people with a goddamn gun. Actually cursing on air. Said, oh, they got a gun. They have him on, and he goes, well, yeah, he was like a deer in headlights. What the hell are you talking about? And so I knew that they were going to make a thing out of Arizona, because Chip and I knew this. They had the Southern Poverty Law Center. They had a woman named Byrick or something. She had come here, and they're whipping up. The skinheads are taking over Arizona, and it was all BS that they were making up. Well, we had her on the show. We had a nice relationship. Southern Poverty Law Center. We just want to get the bad guys being bad and stuff. And then we had Mike Potok, or Mark Potok or whatever, that did the Southern Poverty Law Center MIAC reports and all this kind of listing of all these people that got this list from Southern Poverty Law Center, so obviously we opened an investigation, says the FBI kind of crap. They went Arizona, Georgia, Montana, Michigan. Arizona, Georgia, Montana, Michigan. It was like a loop. Over years, they just kept using the same thing to build up some big giant whatever the hell they could do against militias. Well, we knew Arizona was next. Here they come. We could see it coming. So I called the Confrontation Prevention Squad, which later became Community Services or whatever, from the Phoenix Police Department. There was a guy named Al Ramirez that we worked with. And we never got permission. We just go, look, we're going to be here. We're going to have guns. We're going to, get over it. And, just FYI. And you should be there to keep that one cop they just hired from the Iraq war that wants to hut, and respect my authority, and I'm going to kick your ass and shoot you. I go, look, we know we're being legal. So you just need to keep your boys in check. Well, he came to our workshop that we had, and he comes in with his supervisor, and we walked him around the access that we had to the internet of how fast we could post something. And I go, look, we can take 10 seconds of you being stupid, drag it out into a 15-minute, you look stupid, you don't want to play. Just saying, okay? So you're like, all right. We did the same thing with We Won't Fly when we didn't want to get anal probed at the airport and all this kind of stuff. We had a relationship with these guys. So then later they changed the guys. They, much more hut, going to kick your ass. But at the time, they were working with us because they knew they were protecting our rights. Well, black man with a gun, Chris, one of the Ron Paul Revolutionary, had brought his AR-15 and a 9mm on his hip, and he's all in a white long sleeve shirt and tie, and he was black with a gun at an Obama thing. And where the Democrats and the Republicans, the unions bust in a bunch of people from Tucson, and they got one corner, the Republicans on the other corner. Well, we were already there doing the show. Well, we were talking about, Second Amendment rights and that kind of stuff. Well, what happened? They go, you hijacked our health care thing, you did, and they're not talking about what we want to talk about. And KTAR, the Clear Channel station, they're all pissed off, and Habby on, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going, look, Chris comes on, and he goes, yep, I'm here to fire and protect myself in future and whatever. And it became a thing. They wanted to know who he was. Of course they knew who he was, but the media wanted to know. Well, he's like, Ernie, man, they want me to go. So he went down to the Freedom's Phoenix workshop, and we had all our logos in our television studio there and stuff. And we had a big studio. And the NBC affiliate, Channel 12, interviews him for like 20, 30 minutes. He says all the great stuff, and I kept warning these guys. You go, statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, turn off the microphone, step to the side, and you're done. Don't get into a conversation with them. They're going to trick you into 5 seconds of whatever the hell they want. During that interview, he goes, yeah, and I hate Obama. Well, they put that on loop. I hate Obama. I hate Obama. I hate Obama. But he was black, so it didn't fit their narrative. They didn't like that none too much. What they had done, they couldn't get him, so I said, all right, I'll bail you out, but I'm not doing that. I keep telling you guys not to do this kind of crap. You say what you're going to say and shut up. So I went on down to a studio where CNN did it live. I was on with Rick Sanchez on CNN. Just go Ernest Hancock CNN, it'll come up. So I go in there and I go, yep, we did this. Well, it seems like you don't. Oh, yeah, we did it on purpose because you guys are so easy. You guys, you didn't show that he was a black man. You're talking about skinheads and white people with guns and militia, whatever, and you got a black man there exercising his rights. And I go, you don't show that. I mean, you guys, you're killing me. So, and I was nice and, kind of having fun. Well, it seems like, you're making light, having fun. If you're not having fun advocating for freedom, you're doing it wrong. I mean, that's just the way it is. So we have been in the belly of the beast in the general public opinion thing on this forever. They lie, they manipulate, misinformation, disinformation, whatever the hell they can do. And as activists, we use that to our advantage. And they have been my entire aware adult life since the late 80s when I started doing this activism. It has been clear they want you disarmed. They want you not able to resist. When it came to COVID, even the left and people started to realize what was going on. Whoa, man, we better go get some guns. We better get them because I might be in the crosshairs or something. When they start going and they find out, they got to wait. They got to get in line. They're like, well, wait. Yeah, you feel me? When you need it, these rights the most. Rights delayed are rights denied. This is going to come. The Second Amendment and gun rights is not going to go away. They're not going to take that issue and just let it go. Because they don't have anything else. Chip, I want you to answer this. In your experience, all of us doing this kind of stuff, what is it that the left is going to embrace, to elevate AOC and Schumer and these guys and Warren, Elizabeth Warren. I mean, what the hell do they got other than control of the election box? What is it that they're going to gravitate towards to try and get votes? Had they already lost? Is there something else? The aliens come land and they get the continuation of government and we rule you, based on because we got a big gun and a shiny badge? What do you think is going to happen in light of all this experience that we've had?
Hard to say. One could make the argument that what they need is for their opponents to overreact, and that if you want to get your opponents to overreact, taking out someone like Charlie is a good way to stir that up and maybe make it happen. So you could go down that line of thinking.
But your experience at Dream City was they're like, nope, we're winning, it's all good.
Yeah, no, I mean the people there were not likely to overreact, but there's loose cannons on all sides. We know that. And so, we've got loose cannons on our side that we have to worry about and look after. And I guarantee you some of them are very upset about what happened to Charlie, and they might be thinking ill-advised thoughts, and somebody might do something stupid. And the left would capitalize on that the best they could, and maybe they're hoping for it. I think some of them are secretly hoping for it.
Yep.
Chip, I have a question. You don't have to answer this if it's too personal, but can I ask what your daughter's thinking of this? Does she see it as crazy trans person? Is she seeing it as just God's will? Is she seeing? I don't know. I'm just trying to get a sense of someone who's going through this at the right demographic of who he touched.
Right.
What's her response?
I think you're referring to my sister. I don't have a daughter.
Sister.
But
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about your sister.
No problem. Yeah, she's like I say, she's relatively new to her political awareness, and prior to this, she's been having to struggle as this is nothing new to hear, I'm sure. There's a lot of lifetime friends that she's had who are not comfortable with her political conservatism, and she is experiencing the loss of some friends who she thought were always going to be beside her. So she's already been going through that, and it's been causing her to be she's always been a mature person, but there's a bit of growing up that goes on with that. And so she feels a little bit alone. And then after yesterday, she feels even more alone because she could at least look to someone like Charlie and say, there are people in the world, good people in the world who get it and who we can rely on. And now you got to wonder, who can we rely on? What everything is in flux for her. So she's going through a bit of a crisis right now, I can tell you. And I'm sure she'll get through it. And I'm sure the same thing is happening with a lot of people around the country. She and other people like her need understanding and love and a sense of security from those of us who maybe have been through more, have been tested more. Yeah, there's not much more to be said about that. There's a long road.
Stuart Rhodes went on Alex Jones and talked about reconstituting and building up Oath Keepers again. And that was a big threat when you have military and police. We remember, what was his name? Police and military against a New World Order, Jack McLamb. And we've gone through a lot of this same kind of stuff before the internet. Well, when he did Oath Keepers, that was a threat. Man, keep your oath to defend the Constitution. Oh, hell no, we can't have that, Well, he's reconstituting that. And I remember they did a 60-minute thing on it in the 90s. It was Green Beret out of Fort Bragg or something that had this thing called the Resistors. Do you remember that, Chip?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember. There was a newsletter called The Resistor. And I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who did it, but he was a Special Forces reservist. And I remember there were allegations that he had at some point dabbled with associating with people who supposedly were white supremacists or something. I have no idea how much of that was or wasn't true. But he basically recognized that if there is going to be a a collision point in the future between an authoritarian government and the people just simply yearning to be free. There were going to be, the unregulated militia, the average guy who would resist, but the average guy is only going to be able to do so much, and it would be better if they had some professional coaching in things military. So there were guys like him who were skilled in all things military and in having to train insurgents, in fact, who saw it upon themselves, sort of like sheepdogs, to place themselves in a position where if and when that happens, if the resistance movement grows, people are going to have information resources. They're going to have certain like lesson plans given to them to study, to understand these things, to learn, to have knowledge. So that's what he was about in starting the Resistor. The Resistor was just again, it was pre-internet. It was a newsletter that was meant to give people a frame of mind to understand the sort of thinking they would need to attain to survive and to thrive in a bad future. And
Jack McLam
what I later learned,
go ahead.
What I later learned in my own activities with what happened with the militia here in Arizona, I found out that there was a larger special forces community that was part of that. He was just the little tiny iceberg poking out of the ocean, but there was a whole bunch more below that. And there was both a current serving and retired special forces community who had dedicated themselves to their oath that they had never forgotten, which was to defend the Republic against its enemies, both foreign and domestic. And
now they're queuing on 4chan.
Yeah, when I was involved in the militia movement here in Arizona, we had a member of our group who, unbeknownst to me until later, was one of those guys. He joined us pretending to just be your average golly gee shucks Bubba. But come to find out, no, he had been a professional killer for many years, had been overseas, fought in Vietnam. There's a lot he couldn't tell me, but what he did tell me would just curl your hair.
At the time, there was a guy that Jack McLam was the original officer friendly. And the reason is in the 80s, he refused to be a tool for, the feds and, stand here and direct traffic and do this while we violate these guys' rights. And where he go, whoa, there's a constitution. And he was fired like 5 times and rehired and they put him on a footbeat in the worst part of Phoenix. It's South Phoenix and gang-led and no backup, no security, no, you're on your own, boy. And so he became Friends of the Community. He was the original officer friendly. And he gained a lot of popularity, and he was for the Constitution and all this stuff. And then there was a pamphlet, a book they wrote, Vampire Killer 2000. And it was all about police and military against the New World Order, because he knew the police and the military were going to be the tip of the spear for doing what they're doing now, for violating rights, going in heavy-handed. The National Guard into the cities will, see how that works out. But, this is what he was warning of. Then there was another one. He did a subsequent one after that, and then he passed away. But it was, and I've interviewed him a lot. When I first started doing radio in 2003, I did like a 4-part series with him, while we, had our first radio gig that I thought was only going to be like 13 weeks. And it turned into a thing. But, we went through that whole thing. And what it was police and military against the New World Order was kind of the resistors kind of newsletter thing. And the government, the reason they kept firing him, because he refused to give up his mailing list. And it involved a bunch of current military and police that knew what was happening, that were getting his newsletter, and they wanted to purge them big time. And they did everything they could to get that from him, which he refused to give them. And this was, and of course, I'm sure through the post office they get whatever, but this has been going on for a long time. And we were activists, young men and women in their 20s and 30s. Back then, we were the Charlie Kirks of the day, emphasizing what was going on and how it related. My focus was election law. They eliminated competition. They made sure who got us how we get Napolitano and Katie Hobbs and all this other crap, and why it is that Sheriff Arpaio of DEA winds up retiring, coming to Arizona and being sheriff. I mean, we've been through it all. And to think that you can convince me or any of us or Chip that this is not intentional, a plan, and they are progressing with their plan to the point, here comes the World Economic Forum, you'll own nothing, and here's your happy shot. This is all part of the plan. And the big, giant, greatest depression that be a-coming is going to be the Great Reset towards Palantir telling you, what you can and can't do. Here it comes. And when they got programmable money, it's over. And we occupy the land, in my opinion.
Yeah. So look, I have to start winding this down. I have to get going myself. But I wanted to just end with two things. First, sure, maybe you guys have already seen it by the time we've been talking. They have a person of interest that's all over the internet right now. I'm sure, Ernie, you probably even have it up as we've been talking. They just have a guy that's a thin-looking guy with, white long sleeve shirt and, and aviator glasses and a hat. So who knows? But, I mean, they had two false alarms. Yeah, they have two false alarms yesterday. So who knows, innocent until proven guilty, but we'll see if there's an answer to that. He doesn't have purple hair, so that's a little surprise. And then the other was the response to Charlie Kirk, about who picks up the mantle, or like with your sister or others, like my own wife, who do they start to listen to? Obviously, it shouldn't be, I don't think anyone should just listen to one person. It should be themselves. They listen to themselves. They become their own person. And it's dare I say, it takes a village of ideas and people and rebuilding a culture. But the principles. The question is, who might start to slide into that spot? Is it someone like Charlie Kirk, more of his temperament? Is it someone maybe different, maybe more on the religious side? Maybe it takes more of a religious connotation for Charlie Kirk 2.0 as an example. Or does it go the other direction of a firebrand? And I'm asking that because we're just throwing to the audience. We'll see what happens. Because waiting in the wings is a firebrand that has been building and building, and we have never talked, at least Ernie and I have never talked about on this show, and that his name is Nick Fuentes. And I'm sure, Ernie, you've been watching him. And so he is like Charlie Kirk mixed with, vigor and anger and, I mean, he's a force of nature in himself. He's exceptionally articulate and almost like some people even think he's part of the deep state himself. And that gets into the back and forth he's had with Tucker and all. But he was a name that was banned to the nether realm of the internet and maybe Rumble, and now he started working up his ranks to a staple in Rumble, and now you're seeing him on YouTube. And what's fascinating, he was already building a lot of steam. Then he had a feud with Tucker Carlson, which of course gave him even more Streisand effect on that one. And then this happens with Charlie Kirk, which, if some people start to get very red-pilled over this and angry that there are no answers or solutions, Nick Fuentes is just sitting there chopping at his, just salivating over, I'm sure, his new ratings going up. So anyway, just throwing that out.
I don't see one person.
I agree. I don't
think it should be.
I'm just letting you know that I predict. I'm saying that I personally like the guy.
But
Nick Fuentes, I'm predicting, though, that Nick Fuentes is going to have a much, much larger footprint coming out of this. That's my prediction.
My sister and I were debating about this last night while we were over at Dream City. And, we were talking about the other guys who were involved in Turning Points USA with Charlie, and if any one of them might be now stepping up or whatever. And I'm of the opinion that in this sort of thing, politics, we know, is a sharp elbows, full contact sort of sport. And it involves multiple roles. People play certain niche roles in politics. And Charlie played the good guy. And, the good cop, you could say. And there's always that good cop, bad cop duality. I think with the attitude, the hurt attitude that people now have, they may be ready for a bad cop. And so maybe Nick Fuentes is that guy. But I hope we get back to somebody being the good guy like Charlie, because that's why he was so effective.
And that's why Stuart Rhodes was effective. He was I've interviewed him a lot. We talked recently. I can see the reconstitution of Oath Keepers as being a thing. And because he had that kind of attitude, hey, man, we're just keeping the oath. And even in private discussions with him, he doesn't crack. Nope, there's no violence. You don't go that way. That's not. He was way more Charlie Kirk, which is why I think he was took over a segment from Alex. And he's a guy with the eye patch, and the cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And he's
definitely rocking that whole pirate thing.
Yeah, and I see him elevating, not necessarily to the youth, but in the same kind of calm, reasonable. That's what pisses the bad guys off more than anything, and why he was so targeted and did, solitary confinement for so long, was because he was effective in this way. So I see the next person not being a firebrand. I need to more like Dream City love and recommit yourself to your family and your God and your country, that kind of thing. That is what they, them, those do not want. One final thing I wanted to make sure I got in is Tucker Carlson has rescheduled the release of his 9/11 files. We join all those in mourning the death of Charlie Kirk and are postponing the release of the 9/11 files. Thank you for understanding, which I think is a good idea. Yep. We need to run this through for a little while. And, go ahead.
Speaking of popular culture, there's something coming up here shortly. You may have seen the trailer for this movie coming out called One Battle After Another. And it's this semi-comedic liberal fantasy about revolutionaries. And I think it may get postponed in this current environment because it is, you can just tell from watching the trailer, it's meant to portray the revolutionary liberal type as being the hero that the world needs. And that might be a little bit too much of a message right now after what happened yesterday.
Yeah,
well, I tell you what,
exactly.
When we saw The Joker in October of 2019, Bob and I were back in Massachusetts, and we went and saw that. What the hell? We go see him, and we were like, what the shit was this? Well, it was a prelude to Portland and all this stuff that happened, in the summer of 20 and all. It's all planned. Hollywood and its general public opinion. Here we go. One battle after another. It's going to be the same kind of crap. I'm really, you had the Obamas and their thing on Netflix. They did a movie, and I don't care. It's constant battle, and it always goes back to Ron Paul. Ron Paul understood principally what is important, what we need to know, what our responsibilities are, and how we are able to battle this with just information. And that is the most dangerous today than those. And America represents that. It is an American thing. And America is in the freaking way. And I
make a prediction. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but regarding culture being downstream of politics, and basically I was making a reference to culture about this upcoming movie.
Upstream.
I don't know how familiar you are with Angel Studios, but I expect we're probably going to very shortly see a biopic from Angel Studios about Charlie.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. All right. Well, I think we milked the crap out of this enough today. I'll let you, Chip have, his final word, and then a half hour of Frank final word, and then I'll say something, and we're good.
No final. My final word is ditto to Chip. So thanks for being on the show, Chip. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have you back. Yeah.
Happy to be back anytime. I'm retired now, so I got the time.
Yeah, okay. Chip is not his real name, and you see in the graphics up here that you have a reference to Chip Saunders, which is an old black and white from the 60s, 50s, 60s of combat. It was a TV show that was popular at the time, and it has, I think we had some pictures up here, and he was the guy that carried around a Thompson machine gun, a Thompson. Well, Chip is a big fan of Thompson, so that's why when he writes on Freedom's Phoenix or we have him come in, it's all about, these Chip Saunders. Well, that's why. There it is.
Yeah,
And
years ago when I had my troubles with the government, it centered around a Thompson. And so my nom de guerre that I adopted when I got back to the real world and got on the internet, I became Chip Saunders.
There
so
we go.
that's where that comes from, just FYI. And go
Well,
ahead.
gentlemen, I'm gonna get ready to go watch another my round 4 of the Patriot. I think I'll slip that in for tonight, and that'll be my pleasant viewing. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. Have yourself a great week.
Peace, brother.
Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
All right, Chip, go ahead and give your final, man.
Oh, golly, I'm so used to you talking, so I don't really have anything prepared as a final statement. But yeah, but I'm definitely going to be sharing with you anything I learn here over the coming days as we learn more. Being a gun expert, everybody wants, my opinion about, oh, was this possible? Was that possible? Are they lying about this? And so far, from the very limited amount we're seeing so far, all I can say is I'm not spotting any inconsistencies. I'm not spotting any lies yet. But if I see any, I will definitely let you know.
Yeah, I'm already expecting the lies. Here we go. I'm just so. My thoughts on the whole thing is, in the last month or so, I've been kind of thinking, this is not. We're building up to something. This is not over. Here we go. There's going to be a reckoning for somebody for something, and it really is fallen upon the Trump administration to do what they promised, which was disclosure of everything.
Yeah.
No more secret file, no more redacted, no more. We paid for it. We're not children. Why aren't we able to get access to this information? Why? Well, it what? It what? It what? It makes you look bad? Well, hell, we already know that. It's what? What is your reason, your excuse? So I'm very much in opposition to this secrecy, and I don't feel. I think Kash Patel and Dan Bongino came up against that, and you got to wait for the. But I'm sure they got them in there so they can sign a bunch of NDAs that you're not allowed to talk about something, because if Dan gets out, it's like, oh man, let me tell you what's up. So I'm looking forward to the revelations that we get from everything, from Europe, from the Eastern blocs, from people around the world that are starting to because of the internet. The world prior to the COVID was getting really small. You could go anywhere at any time, do almost anything, and have relationships with. And Chip and I remember the days of, the Russian Rusky. You got a Rusky friend? Oh my God! And you start to find out that they're just people like us, suffering under a government of whatever, and it's going to evolve into the quest for survival, thrival from government. There's going to be governance, but there's not going to be this concept, the idea that you're just a slave, and the promise in the Declaration of Independence that you're not going to be a slave in America. To the degree that we're freer than the rest of the planet is to the degree that we are prosperous and wealthy. Until they get back to that, we look into the future and see what is supported and what's punished. And what's supported is this collective we rule you kind of Palantir we know AI crap, as opposed to these tools being used down at the individual level to better our own lives and our communities. Until we get to that, we're going to have this consternation. So until then, to insulate yourself and your family, occupytheland.org, just say it. Any final comment, Chip?
No, we're good.
Thanks for coming on. This was a really good show. I'm glad we got this out now, because it's just so necessary to have this conversation, and from our perspective to reach back and share with the audience what we know and how we know it and why and what we see coming. You can see what we expect from our experiences, because we've been there, done that, bunch of T-shirts. Hell, I got $100,000 Bitcoin paid for hoodies in my closet. So, I mean, I got plenty of T-shirts. So this has been awesome. When you know something, let us know. I'm looking forward to talking to you again, Chip. Peace, brother.
Definitely will.